Chapter 1716. Feng Run City. In the city governor's mansion. According to Lu Jiji's memories, Yu Haoran quietly killed the 5 experts who were qualified to contact the Great Han Empire's imperial family and the Heavenly Fragrance Pavilion's upper echelons. However, they were not among his suspected target. After that, Yu Haoran returned to the rockery in the underground stone chamber. He gently leaped onto the rockery and looked at Feng Run City that was still covered in darkness. He ordered Thaling and his second avatar in his sea of consciousness. "Thaling Brother Ran, I'll have to trouble you. Yu Haoran, if my second avatar and I work together to set up the formation, we'll only need 5 hours at most," Thaling reminded Yu Haoran before he left with his second avatar. "I understand." Yu Haoran nodded as he understood what Thaling meant. He immediately mobilized Emperor Wu's divine sense, which was at the peak of 5th stage divine sense, to inform Lan Rong and Han Guangbei, who were hiding in a dense forest thousands of miles away. He ordered them to immediately lead the army to attack Feng Run City. After that, he stood quietly on top of the rockery, waiting for the 100,000 elite soldiers of the left army to attack Feng Run City. With the help of the flesh and blood essence of the venerable realm blue-bellied whale, almost 90% of the elite soldiers achieved a breakthrough in their cultivation and realm. This also allowed the weakest among the 100,000 elite soldiers to reach the peak of 9th stage martial grandmaster. With the help of elixirs and spiritual stones, the peak of 9th stage martial grandmaster cultivation could maintain a high-speed flight distance of more than 10,000 miles. Therefore, the left army that used the flying method to rush to Feng Run City only took less than half an hour to reach a position less than 100 miles away from Feng Run City. At this moment, the terrifying aura of 100,000 elite soldiers gathered together had already alerted countless experts of martial grandmaster realm and above in the city, as well as the city guards on the southern city wall. Enemy attack! Enemy attack! Enemy attack! The army is coming. Run for your lives. Feng Run City's geographical location was remote, and behind it was the Qinghu mountain range as a natural barrier. Therefore, the city guards never thought that they would be attacked by the army one day. Therefore, when they saw the 100,000 elite soldiers charging at them from outside the city, the thousands of city guards on the city wall either screamed in panic, froze on the spot and didn't know what to do, or flew into the air to meet the enemy head-on. Looking at the reaction of the city guards, Yu Haoran shook his head in disappointment. However, he could not help but admire Emperor Qin. In order to ensure the combat strength of the city guard army in each city, as well as to strengthen the absolute control of the imperial family, he would transfer 50% to 60% of the city guard army from different cities every year to join the border guards for a period of 3 to 5 years. During the rotation period, the most dangerous and difficult missions were the city guard. This way, not only could it increase the city guard's combat strength, but it could also weaken the strength of the various cities. Yu Shixiang, what's going on? Because the passage to the underground stone room was always open, it lost the effect of blocking sound. The battle between the 100,000 soldiers and the city guards immediately alerted Shao Jie and the others in the 7th stone room. After leaving the 7th stone room hand in hand and passing through the underground passage to the outside of the fake mountain, Shao Jie, who had an extraordinary background, couldn't help but change her expression when she heard the deafening sounds of fighting coming from the southern city gate. She quickly raised her head and asked Yu Haoran who was on the fake mountain. Junior sister Shao, as a direct descendant of the Shao clan, one of the 4 great clans of the imperial capital, can't you guess? Yu Haoran asked with a light smile as he lowered his head to look at Shao Jie, whose eyes were filled with doubt. Yu Haoran's question made Shao Jie's delicate body tremble. The doubt in her eyes was immediately replaced by shock. Yu Shixiang, whether it is the number of top experts or the overall strength of the empire, our great Han Empire far surpasses your great Emperor Qin Empire. Could it be that your Emperor Qin has gone mad and actually dared to take the initiative to attack our great Han Empire? Junior Sister Xiao, the plan to conquer your great Han Empire is my, Yu Haoran's, own decision. The main general of the expedition is also me. Yu Haoran replied with a smile as he gestured for Xiao Jie to come to the artificial mountain. Junior Sister Xiao, based on your experience, is the idea of conquering the great Han Empire too risky? Will the final plan succeed? Yu Shixiang, don't you think your question is very funny? After rolling her eyes at Yu Haoran, Xiao Jie pointed at the location of the great Han Empire's capital city and said with an arrogant expression, "Although our great Han Empire's territory is inferior to your Emperor Qin Empire's, the eastern region's spiritual energy and cultivation resources are far superior to the southern regions. The complete inheritance of sex and family forces makes our overall strength at least 10 times stronger than yours, not to mention the number of top experts." At this point, the corner of Xiao Jie's mouth curled up slightly as she mocked with a disdainful expression. Using the great Han Empire as the target of the expedition is undoubtedly like a dragonfly trying to shake a stone pillar. You're overestimating yourself. Junior Sister Xiao, why do I feel that the final result of the expedition is that our Emperor Qin Empire will be able to completely replace the great Han Empire? Yu Haoran didn't get angry because of Xiao Jie's mockery. He still had a faint smile on his face as he replied. Yu Haoran's reply was as gentle as a breeze, but Xiao Jie's expression couldn't help but change. This was because she suddenly thought of Fengrun City's city lord, Lu Zhiji. She thought of those nobles who had their own armies and the rotten royal family. The arrogance on her body suddenly disappeared without a trace. However, she had been taught to be loyal and patriotic since she was young. This made her instinctively want to tell the higher-ups of her family in detail about what was happening before her eyes. This would allow her family and the royal family to take precautions in advance and defeat the Emperor Qin Empire's ambition of conquering the eastern region. She could also use this opportunity to sound the alarm for the royal family. However, just as she started to mobilize her origin energy and soul power and was about to use a special secret technique, Yu Haoran's indifferent warning sounded in her ears. Junior Sister Xiao, if you still want to smoothly leave Fengrun City and safely return to the Xiao clan in the imperial capital, it's best that you immediately put away those unrealistic thoughts. Otherwise, I don't mind letting you return to the iron cage in the stone room. Yu Haoran's warning and threat made Xiao Jie feel a trace of fear. She obediently stopped using the secret technique, but she didn't blame Yu Haoran for his threat at all. This was because she knew that as the prince consort of the Emperor Qin Empire, he would definitely prioritize the interests of the empire when facing the issue of leading an army into battle. Seeing that Xiao Jie didn't have the slightest bit of resentment and gave up on using the secret technique to contact the higher-ups of her family, Yu Haoran nodded with deep gratification. He then spoke to Qing Si and the other 13 people under the fake mountain. In order to ensure that the army can smoothly occupy Fengrun City and take proper defensive measures, I hope that you can quietly stay in this courtyard for 5 hours. Chapter 1717. Fengrun City, the City Lord's Mansion. Xiao Jie's heart trembled when she heard that Yu Haoran was giving her the time she wanted. Yu Shixiang, do you really only need 5 hours? That's right, just 5 hours. Nodding in confirmation, Yu Haoran leaped into the air and headed straight for the city gate. Looking at Yu Haoran, who quickly left the rockery courtyard, Xiao Jie's eyes revealed a trace of struggle, and her slender fingers also slightly raised. However, when she saw the tunnel leading to the underground stone room, she couldn't help but sigh and put down her raised fingers. Why are you following me? When Yu Haoran rushed to the city gate, he realized that Xiang Muling was following behind him. He had no choice but to stop and ask. You are good to me, so I will protect you. Xiang Muling replied innocently. Muling, I don't need your protection. Yu Haoran rejected her with a frown. Xiang Muling was only a first-grade martial king, so she didn't have the ability to protect herself. Furthermore, he didn't need or like the feeling of being protected by a girl. You are good to me, so I will always protect you. In the face of Yu Haoran's rejection, the stubborn Xiang Muling repeated her point of view like a child. Yu Haoran turned around and saw the innocence in Xiang Muling's eyes. He thought about the tragic life she had gone through and his heart softened. He didn't have the heart to continue rejecting her and could only remind her gently. All right, then take care of yourself. I understand. Xiang Muling nodded happily after receiving Yu Haoran's approval. Yu Haoran sighed when he saw that Xiang Muling was like a child who hadn't grown up yet. He then brought her to Lan Rong and the others. Greetings, Prince Consort. Lan Rong and the other generals immediately knelt down on one knee. Rise. Yu Haoran smiled as he gestured. Immediately after, he put away the smile on his face and ordered with a dignified expression. General Lin, immediately lead the troops and completely seal off Fengrun City. No one is allowed to leave within the next 5 hours. This subordinate obeys. Lin Xiangrong stood up and led nearly 20,000 troops to seal off Fengrun City. General Li, General Yuan, immediately lead your men to exterminate the remaining city guards in the city. This subordinate obeys. Li Quanqing and Ma Yinghai responded to the order and rose to their feet as well, leading over 20,000 men to slaughter the fleeing city guards. General Qi, immediately lead our troops to calm the people in the city. This subordinate is proud. Qi Weixian also immediately got up and dispersed nearly 10,000 troops to do the work of pacifying. General Lan, attack the city lord's mansion. Pointing to the north of the city, Yu Haoran instructed Lan Rong. This subordinate obeys. After getting up, Lan Rong drew the sword that symbolized his identity as a great general and shouted at the remaining 40,000 elite soldiers. Kill. At the same time, the 40,000 elite soldiers took out their natal spiritual artifacts and roared at the top of their lungs. Kill. Accompanied by the deafening roar, the 40,000 elite soldiers rushed toward the city lord's mansion dozens of miles away like rolling waves. Ignoring the actions of Lan Rong and the others, Yu Haoran chose the tallest tower in the city. He sat cross-legged at the top of the tower and used his divine thought to seal off the area within a radius of 10,000 miles, vigilant against any threats that might appear at any time. At the same time, he continued to use the yin-yang mystical fire to refine the black and white wings to improve his realm and strength. Xiang Muling, who was following closely behind him, stood quietly at the side, looking as if she would not leave even half a step. Palace, who had already completed the assassination mission, had been staying in one of the courtyards in the city lord's mansion to avoid meeting the extremely curious Qing Si. After seeing Yu Haoran, who was sitting cross-legged, he immediately appeared at the top of the tower. Ignoring Xiang Muling, who was standing at the side, he directly sat cross-legged and continued to comprehend the murderous aura in the immortal slaughtering sword while waiting for instructions to act. Since City Lord Li Jiji and most of the martial revered and martial saint experts in the city were killed, the city guards and the family forces immediately fell into chaos. In the face of the well-trained army on the left and the 100,000 elite soldiers filled with murderous intent, the 50,000 city guards and the 100,000 family elites were either killed mercilessly or had their cultivation and strength sealed and thrown into the death prison in just 1 hour. At the same time, under the command of the experienced Lan Rong and a few other generals, the 100,000 elite soldiers quickly took over the important positions and passes in the city. In the shortest time possible, they comforted the people who had taken the opportunity to escape from Fengrun City. Time passed by minute by minute. Fengrun City, which had fallen into chaos, gradually regained its calm. Yu Haoran, who was at the top of the tower, also slowly opened his eyes. In less than 5 hours, Thaling and his second doppelganger had successfully set up the Sun-Moon Star formation and the attack formation. During this time, they did not encounter any unforeseen circumstances. Howren, these two jade slips contain the methods to control the Sun-Moon-Star formation and the attack formation. You can directly hand them over to Lan Rong and the others later. Thaling, who had returned to the Knowledge Sea, casually threw out the two jade slips and instructed, "Brother Chi, let's go." After receiving the two jade slips, Howren turned his head and signaled to Palace. Then, he went straight to Lan Rong and the others in the City Lord's mansion. Looking at the boundless lake and the small islands that were separated by 1,000 meters, Howren slightly frowned and asked, "Thaling, how can we reach the Snake Beauty's nest?" After successfully occupying Feng Run City, Howren kept his promise and allowed Xiaojie and the others to leave Feng Run City. After that, he waited in Feng Run City for another 7 days. Firstly, he needed to wait for Hui Long to successfully refine the first mythical beast's corpse and for Thaling to help it collect the other 8 mythical beasts' corpses. Secondly, he also needed to teach the Great Han Empire a bloody lesson. He needed to let the Great Han Empire's royal family and the Ministry of War know that the occupied Feng Run City had completely changed its name. From now on, it was Howren's private territory. In 7 days, Feng Run City was attacked by the Great Han Empire a total of 5 times. Among the 5 attacks, 3 of them were from Emperor Wu and the martial honorables. However, they were all killed by him and Palace. The other 2 attacks were from the army. However, they were all killed by Lan Rong and the others who led 100,000 elite soldiers and coordinated with the attack formation set up by Thaling. Perhaps it was because of the failure of the 5 attacks that the Great Han Empire knew that Feng Run City was a tough nut to crack. They needed to gather more troops. Chapter 17-18. Since Feng Run City would not be in any danger for the time being, Howren quietly left Feng Run City with Palace and rushed to the Crouching Dragon Lake where the Snake Bell clan resided. What was his purpose? It was to fulfill his promise to the sisters, Ru Yin and Ru Yun. Howren, based on my personal understanding of the Snake Bell clan and the information revealed by the 3 little girls, I don't think you need to enter the Snake Bell clan's lair at all. Thaling, who already had a plan in mind, suggested in the face of Howren's interrogation. You only need to attack them and force them out of their lair. Then, you can intimidate them into handing over Ru Yin and Ru Yun. That works too. Considering that the Snake Bell clan was also a mysterious clan from ancient times, it was too risky to barge into their lair without knowing their true background in detail. Therefore, in the face of Thaling's suggestion, Howren nodded in agreement without any hesitation. He then turned his head and instructed Palace. "Brother Chi, please wait for a moment." Then, he flew directly to the center of the Crouching Dragon Lake and activated the ancestral witch's physical body that was close to 5,000 meters long. He also took out the ultimate Venerable Realm staff weapon. "Enlarge it for me." At the same time, Howren directly threw the white stick into the air, instructing the tool spirit of the stick magic tool. The white staff, that was originally only 2 meters long, quickly turned into a giant pillar that was 7,000 meters long under the weapon spirit's control. It extended 2 gigantic palms that were like mountains and held one end of the staff tightly while smashing the other end into the lake. Boom! Accompanied by a deafening roar, the surface of the lake that was smashed by the staff immediately stirred up huge waves that were close to 1,000 meters tall. At the same time, the force formed by the staff and the lake's surface quickly penetrated the obstacles in the lake and reached the bottom of the lake. Who dares to behave atrociously on the Crouching Dragon Lake? Just as the force formed by the staff penetrated the bottom of the lake, a dignified voice suddenly came from a group of magnificent palaces. Accompanied by the dignified voice, a male snake bell with a naked upper body and long purple hair with a human body and a snake tail appeared above the palace. Immediately after, 3 male snake beauties with green and blue hair appeared above the palace, each emitting a powerful aura. Jiang Zihui, Jiang Xinhong, Zhao Jinglin, come with me immediately to kill that human powerhouse. The purple-haired snake beauty ordered with a gloomy expression as her powerful divine sense locked onto the giant that was waving the white pillar and continuing to smash it towards the lake. Yes, Elder Yu Jun. The two green-haired snake beauties and the blue-haired snake beauties respectfully acknowledged the order. They waved their long snake tails and quickly rushed to the surface of the lake. Yu Haoran, a peak third-stage martial emperor and 3 early-stage martial emperors are here. Just as Yu Haoran was about to continue smashing the white pillar into the lake, Thaling's voice in his sea of consciousness reminded him. As he quickly put away the white pillar, Yu Haoran immediately returned to his original appearance. Then, he quietly floated in the air and looked at the lake. Brat, who are you? Do you know where this place is? Yu Haoran, who had transformed into the ancestral witch's body, broke through the limit of the martial honorable realm and reached the height of 5,000 meters, which was Emperor Wu's realm. While the 5,000-meter-tall giant created a strong visual impact, it also caused others to automatically overlook his own cultivation. Therefore, Yu Jun, who had rushed out of the lake with his 3 subordinates, discovered that the young man who had returned to his human form was only a peak 9th-grade martial honorable. His cautious expression was immediately replaced by arrogance, and his tone was incomparably domineering as he shouted. You don't have the qualifications to know who I am. You only need to immediately hand over Ru Yin and Ru Yun. Otherwise, I will definitely scatter your soul and turn your tribe into a river of blood. Since he had decided to use offensive methods to force the snake Belle Yu out of her nest, he had never thought of using peaceful means to solve the problem. Therefore, Yu Haoran, who had taken out the celestial trapping sword, also sternly threatened the purple-haired snake Belle Yu. You are the friend of those 2 lowly servants. Hearing Yu Haoran's threat mention Ru Yin and Ru Yun, Yu Jun's expression suddenly changed. At the same time, a strong killing intent surged from his body. The 3-headed snake Belle Yu behind him also looked at Yu Haoran with killing intent. Little snake, since Ru Yin and Ru Yun are my friends, their statuses are naturally much nobler than yours. So, watch your tone. Otherwise, be careful that I will break your teeth and cut off your tongue. Hearing the purple-haired snake Belle use humiliation of Ru Yin and Ru Yun, Yu Haoran's expression instantly darkened as he threatened. He had already learned from the 3 snake Belle Yu about Ru Yin and Ru Yun's encounter, as well as the dangerous situation they were currently in. This was also the main reason why he chose to confront them with a tough attitude. Brat, even an almighty expert like Emperor Wu of your human-inherited family wouldn't dare to speak to me like that. You are just a mere martial saint ant. After mocking him in disdain, Yu Jun turned his head and ordered his 3 subordinates. Capture him alive. I want to break his teeth one by one and cut off his tongue one by one. I want to let him know the consequences of offending me, Yu Jun. Yes, Elder Yu Jun. After cupping their hands in response, the 2 green-haired snake Belle Yu and the blue-haired snake Belle Yu immediately spread out. Then, in a triangular formation, they directly sealed off all of his escape route. In response, Yu Haoran's eyes flashed with a trace of disdain. After flashing the power of law, he instantly appeared in front of one of the green-haired snake Belle Yu. Under the snake Belle Yu's incredulous gaze, the celestial trapping sword in his hand directly cut off his head. Then, his right hand clenched tightly into a fist, directly smashing the head and the soul in his knowledge sea into pieces. Damn it! In just a single exchange, his brother who had gone through fire and water with him for nearly 1,000 years was killed. This caused the other green-haired snake Belle Yu to immediately fall into a state of rage. However, just as he was about to fight to the death with Yu Haoran, he suddenly felt a pain in his chest. He lowered his head and saw a sword with a scabbard slowly being drawn out. Just as he was about to launch a counterattack with his snake tail, A huge fist smashed his head and completely destroyed his divine soul in his sea of consciousness. In less than a second, Yu Haoran had consecutively killed 2 of his subordinates who had just entered the martial emperor realm. This caused Yu Jun's expression to change. Chapter 1719. Crouching Dragon Lake, mid-air. Zhao Jinglin immediately used the Bloodline's forbidden secret technique, Death Gaze. With the potential of a top genius and the ability to challenge those of a higher level, Yu Haoran's means were not what Yuan Shijun was most worried about. What really made him fearful now was the sword with a scabbard in the other party's hand, which vaguely gave him an extremely dangerous feeling. With the snake's insidious and selfish nature, Yuan Shijun intended to expend nearly half of his subordinate's life to use the Bloodline's forbidden secret technique to test the true power of the scabbard sword and decide what to do next. After hearing Yuan Shijun's order, the blue-haired snake beauty Zhao Jinglin's eyes flashed with a trace of fear, but when she thought of Yuan Shijun's inhumane and cruel means, the fear in her eyes was instantly replaced by determination. Then, Zhao Jinglin slowly closed her eyes, and a strange aura quickly rose from her body. Whether it was the dual power of the law of speed or the dual power of the law of flash, they could all allow Yu Haoran to interrupt the forbidden secret technique that the other party was using. But he did not do so. This was because he wanted to see for himself just how powerful the forbidden secret technique, death condensation, was. It was said that anyone who touched it would die, and anyone who touched it would die. After all, the death condensation in the fish-snake bloodline inheritance was ranked 9th among the top 10 secret techniques in the Tianxian continent. While activating the ancestral sorcerer's physical defense, he mobilized the Rui Bell that had not been used for a long time. After forming a double defense, Thaling agreed to try the forbidden secret technique, death condensation, and set up a defensive formation on his body. Just as Yu Haoran prepared the strongest 3 layers of defense, Zhao Jinglin suddenly opened her eyes. Death condensation. Accompanied by Zhao Jinglin's violent roar, 2 terrifying gazes directly crossed the distance of time and space and instantly blasted on the defensive formation set up by Thaling. 1 second. The defensive formation set up by Thaling only lasted for 1 second before it was torn apart by the 2 special gazes formed by the forbidden secret technique, death condensation, and then heavily blasted on the Rui Bell. This is because the wishful bell was an artifact that had been refined by the soul. When the wishful bell was bombarded by the forbidden mystic technique, the laws of life and death that the soul had comprehended and controlled suddenly began to boil. As he grew stronger, Yu Haoran's understanding of the laws of life and death deepened. With his current control and understanding of the laws of life and death, he could easily fuse them into his body and soul, allowing his cultivation to reach Emperor Wu's level. However, under the influence of the forbidden secret technique, Death's Gaze, he suddenly discovered that not only had he lost control of the laws of life and death, but the laws of life and death were also undergoing some sort of transformation. This made him panic, and he hurriedly sought help from Thaling. A heaven-defying opportunity. After hearing Yu Haoran's description of the changes in the laws of life and death, Thaling couldn't help but exclaim in surprise and hurriedly reminded him. Yu Haoran, it's not convenient to explain the current situation in detail, but I can tell you that the changes in the laws of life and death are a good thing. It's a heaven-defying opportunity that can help you break through to the martial god realm as soon as possible. After hearing Thaling's brief reminder, Yu Haoran's panic was quickly replaced by surprise. He immediately removed the defense of the wishful bell so that the death condensation could bring more transformation energy to the laws of life and death. Unfortunately, Zhao Jinglin was limited by his grade and bloodline purity, so the forbidden secret technique, death condensation, could only last for a short time. It only lasted for 5 seconds. After 5 seconds, Zhao Jinglin closed his eyes again. His long blue hair was instantly replaced by white hair, and his originally vigorous life aura also fell to the twilight of his life. The moment Zhao Jinglin closed his eyes, the surging laws of life and death quickly calmed down, allowing Yu Haoran to regain control over the laws of life and death. However, he didn't like the feeling of being in control right now, so he flashed the laws of life and instantly appeared in front of Zhao Jinglin. After destroying Zhao Jinglin's soul with a punch, he cast a sharp gaze at Ma Yingjun, hoping that the stronger Ma Yingjun could also use the forbidden secret technique, death condensation. Not only was the forbidden secret technique passed down in the Snake Beauty's bloodline unable to force his opponent to use the sword with the scabbard, but it also didn't give him any pressure at all. This caused Ma Yingjun to immediately panic. In particular, when he saw Yu Haoran's sharp gaze, the thought of retreating surged in his heart, causing him to immediately turn around and charge towards the lake. Boom! However, when he was 3 or 4 meters away from the lake, a huge fist quickly flew over, directly sending him into the air again. The dual laws of life and death allowed Yu Haoran to instantly appear in front of the unconscious Ma Yingjun. The seals formed by his 10 fingers immediately sealed Ma Yingjun's soul, completely capturing him alive. After sending Ma Yingjun flying, Pallas tightly gripped the hilt of the immortal slaughtering sword with his left hand and asked murderously, "Brother Yu, should we kill our way into the enemy's lair?" "Brother Qi, don't panic." While shaking his head and rejecting Pallas's suggestion, Yu Haoran took out a strand of Ma Yingjun's long purple hair and a drop of fresh blood that emitted rich spiritual energy. His 10 fingers quickly formed seals. When the 7 seals formed fused with the purple hair and fresh blood, the purple hair and fresh blood quickly condensed into Ma Yingjun's appearance. He stretched out his finger and pointed at Ma Yingjun's forehead, leaving behind a provocative and humiliating sentence. The purple hair and fresh blood condensed into Ma Yingjun instantly disappeared on the spot. In less than 30 seconds, a powerful and terrifying aura quickly emerged from the bottom of the crouching dragon lake. After sensing a powerful aura that far surpassed his own, Pallas, who was standing on the lake's surface, had a slight change in expression. Then, he quickly rose into the air and came to Yu Haoran's side. 1 Emperor Wu Peak 7th Stage, 2 Emperor Wu Early 6th Stage, and 11 Emperor Wu Peak 3rd Stage Snake Beauties. After quickly scanning the bottom of the lake with his divine telekinesis, Thowling introduced in detail the number and strength of the opponents that they would have to face next. As long as no demigod-level false gods appeared, Yu Haoran wasn't worried at all, even if it was Emperor Wu Peak 9th Stage Mighty Expert. Therefore, after hearing Thowling's introduction, he looked at the lake with a calm expression. "Young man, please let go of Ma Yingjun." Among the 14 snake beauties that quickly rushed out of the lake, an old man who had the same long purple hair as Ma Yingjun and whose cultivation had reached Emperor Wu Peak 7th Stage cultivation requested in a relatively polite manner. "Senior, there's no problem in letting him go. However, you have to let go of my 2 friends first." Chapter 1720. On the Crouching Dragon Lake. Controlling Ma Yingjun's body to float in front of him, Yu Haoran replied to the other party in a polite tone, but the attitude of the request was unquestionable. "Young man, I wonder who your 2 friends are?" Thinking of the hundreds of human experts in the water dungeon who had been cheated of all their value, the purple-haired old man already had the idea of agreeing to the exchange. After all, as a top expert at the peak of Level 7 realm, Emperor Wu could feel a trace of dangerous aura from the 2 swords with scabbards. Under the background of today's unpredictable situation, it was best to avoid provoking some potential dangers. "Miss Ru Yin and Miss Ru Yun." Staring into the purple-haired old man's eyes, Yu Haoran said word by word. Boom! Just as Yu Haoran said the names of Ru Yin and Ru Yun, 14 powerful and terrifying auras immediately appeared on the surface of the lake. The 14 snake beauties looked at him with incomparably strong murderous intent. "Young man, what is your relationship with those 2 bitches?" Forcibly suppressing the urge to attack, the purple-haired old man gritted his teeth and asked, "Friends?" Knowing the reason why the other party was so angry after hearing the names of Ru-In and Ru-Yun, Yu-Haoran still replied without the slightest fear. "If that's the case, then you can accompany those two bitches to die." The moment he received Yu-Haoran's reply, the purple-haired old man who couldn't suppress the boiling murderous intent in his heart roared and quickly rushed over. "Brother Yu, I will temporarily delay that old man, you hurry up and finish off the other snake beauties, then we will join hands to kill him." Seeing the 14 snake beauties rushing over, Pallas unsheathed the kill immortal sword from the scabbard and suggested to Yu-Haoran, "Got it." Without the assistance of Thaling and Chua Long, Pallas's strength was far more powerful than his. Since he temporarily delayed the purple-haired old man who was the strongest, it was the most feasible way. Therefore, Yu-Haoran, who also unsheathed the immortal trapping sword, responded to Pallas's suggestion and directly rushed towards the snake beauties. Exterminate! With the assistance of Flash's dual elemental power of law, Yu-Haoran instantly appeared in front of an Emperor Wu's early-stage level 6 snake beauty. The sword chi formed by the combination of the immortal trapping sword and the sword of universal massacre had reached the level of Emperor Wu's early 7th level cultivation. The sword chi destroyed the opponent's body, mind, and spirit. Exterminate! With the assistance of the power of law of speed and speed, he instantly appeared in front of another Emperor Wu's 6th grade snake beauty. Using the same sword moves and attacks, he strangled the powerful snake beauty at the same time. With the death of the 2 Emperor Wu grade 6 snake beauties, the remaining 11 grade 3 Emperor Wu grade 6 snake beauties were no longer a threat and were easily killed by Yu-Haoran with the immortal trapping sword. Then, he overdrew a part of his ancestral wizard bloodline and raised the power of the immortal trapping sword to the level of Emperor Wu grade 7 peak. Then, he rushed towards the purple-haired old man at the level of Emperor Wu grade 7 peak with a murderous look. After the sublimation of his state of mind, although Pallas's strength had been improved, he was still at a disadvantage when facing the purple-haired old man whose grade and strength had reached the level of Emperor Wu grade 7 peak. Fortunately, with his strong physical defense and the sword chi of the immortal slaying sword, although he was at a disadvantage, there was no danger to his life. When Yu-Haoran, who overdrew a part of his ancestral wizard bloodline and was able to exert the sword chi of Emperor Wu grade 7 peak, rushed forward, the situation of being beaten was instantly reversed and the purple-haired old man was immediately in a precarious situation. Bo! When Yu-Haoran used the heaven-destroying sword style of the Heaven and Earth Massacre swordplay to cut off a few strands of the purple-haired old man's hair and cut his cheek, the purple-haired old man immediately used a move that would injure both of them and forced back the joint attack of Yu-Haoran and Pallas. Then, he let out a special roar towards the lake. After the roar, the purple-haired old man slowly closed his eyes. "Brother Chi, let me do it." Feeling the familiar aura emerging from the purple-haired old man, Yu-Haoran directly stood in front of Pallas. With a hint of excitement, he was ready to receive the secret skill that the purple-haired old man had carefully prepared. The purple-haired old man suddenly opened his eyes and shot out 2 strange lights from his eyes. The 2 lights that crossed the distance of space and time instantly merged into Yu-Haoran's body. Feeling the power of the law of life and death boiling more violently, Yu-Haoran forcibly suppressed the surging joy in his heart and pretended to be in pain to avoid arousing the purple-haired old man's suspicion and ended the secret skill of death condensation prematurely. At the same time, his consciousness asked Thaling in his knowledge see. "Thaling, how many times do I have to endure the secret skill of death condensation before the law of life and death can complete the final transformation?" "I don't know." In the face of Yu-Haoran's expectant questioning, Thaling shook his head and reminded him. "Whether it's the law of life and death or the forbidden secret skill of death condensation, I only have a little understanding of it in the past. I'm not very proficient in it, so you have to understand and experience it yourself." Thaling's reminder made Yuhauran immediately stop pretending to be in pain. Then, he slowly closed his eyes and carefully experienced the boiling law of life and death. The life aura skyrocketed and the death aura fell. The life aura fell and the death aura skyrocketed. When the life aura skyrocketed to the limit, it gave birth to a trace of death aura, and when the death aura fell to the limit, it gave birth to a trace of life aura. Through careful observation and experience, Yuhauran felt as if he had sensed a trace of the true essence of life and a trace of the mysteries of death from the boiling law of life and death. Looking at Yuhauran, whose eyes were tightly shut and who had a serene expression and a smile on his face from time to time, the purple-haired old man, who had overdrawn several thousand years of his lifespan to use the forbidden secret skill of death condensation, was so depressed that he almost vomited blood. Fortunately, his powerful state of mind allowed him to quickly dispel the depression in his heart, and by slowly closing his eyes, he forcibly cut off the use of the secret skill of death condensation. As a result, he naturally suffered from the backlash of the secret skill. After losing the forbidden secret skill of death condensation, the boiling law of life and death calmed down again, and Yuhauran lost the opportunity to continue comprehending the true essence of life and the mysteries of death. He did not mind this at all and opened his eyes. When he looked at the purple-haired old man, a trace of greed appeared in his eyes. Chapter 1721. On the Crouching Dragon Lake. Yuhauran immediately appeared in front of the purple-haired old man, whose strength had dropped to the level of Emperor Wu's at the beginning of the third stage because he had overdrawn half of his life force and suffered a backlash from the forbidden secret technique. The celestial trapping sword, which had just returned to its scabbard, was drawn out again. Under the dumbfounded gaze of the purple-haired old man, his head was directly chopped off. As he motioned for Thaling to put away the purple-haired old man's headless corpse, he punched the purple-haired old man's head and spirit. Thaling, the blood essence in the snake beauty's body can accelerate the transformation of the power of the laws of life and death. It can also help me understand the true essence of the law of life and the mystery of the law of death. While sheathing the sword, Yuhauran explained in detail to Thaling in his sea of consciousness why he had asked him to put away the purple-haired old man's headless corpse. "Yuhauran, are you sure?" After hearing Yuhauran's explanation, Thaling, who was sitting cross-legged in the sea of consciousness, suddenly stood up and asked with a rather excited expression. "The limit of life gives birth to the way of death, and the limit of death contains a trace of life force." Without explaining too much, Yuhauran only told Thaling what he had just comprehended. "Yuhauran, put aside the matter of rescuing the two girls for the time being. Next, you have to do your best to kill and collect the blood essence of the snake beauty." Yuhauran told Thaling what he had just comprehended. This allowed Thaling, who had the comprehension of a peak supreme, to be very clear about the true essence of the law of life and the mystery of the law of death, as well as the true meaning they represented. Therefore, Thaling, who was extremely excited in his heart, made his request with an unquestionable attitude. Saving people and the blood essence are equally important. Although Thaling's unquestionable request was for his own good, Yuhauran would still adhere to his own principles in certain matters. "Okay." Thaling took a deep breath and forcibly suppressed the excitement in his heart. While respecting Yuhauran's choice, he immediately mobilized his third tribulation demigod divine thought, intending to forcefully search the nest of the snake beauty to see if the number of snake beauty could satisfy Yuhauran's need for the blood essence to advance the power of law. However, just as his divine thought extended 10 meters to the bottom of the lake, nearly 100 powerful auras were rushing toward the surface of the lake. Thinking, Thaling knew that he must have used a secret method to contact with the same clan, gathering experts of the clan to gather the experts of the clan to come for revenge. Among the 100 auras of powerful demigods, Thaling demigod divine thought, Thaling of quickly demigod divine thought, and suggested demonic body demonic body, Ants quickly suggested the secrets, divines, secret demonic demigod possession of. Yuhauran nodded in agreement without any hesitation when he heard that the strongest of the Snake Beauty's clan, the three-headed Snake Beauty, had reached the first tribulation demigod realm. Just as Thaling performed the demonic demigod possession's secret demonic demigod possession, the surface of the lake, which had just calmed down, was stirred up by waves of powerful auras one after another. Yuhauran and Pallas had no choice but to continue rising into the air for a distance. "Brat, how dare you kill my Snake Beauty's clansman? I think you're tired of living." Following the countless waves that were stirred up on the surface of the lake, a shrill and ear-piercing voice sounded from the highest wave. Accompanied by the shrill and ear-piercing voice, a female Snake Beauty with unparalleled beauty, a graceful figure, and long dark purple hair appeared on the surface of the lake, exuding an alluring aura. "I don't know if you're tired of living, but if you don't hand over my two friends immediately, then this day next year will be the death anniversary of your entire Snake Beauty's clan." Ignoring the enchanting aura emitted by the other party, Yuhauran, who was holding the immortal trapping sword tightly, retorted with a sharp tone. "Wang Shui, go and capture that sharp-toothed brat for this queen. This queen will let him know the consequences of offending our Snake Beauty." Yuhauran was not the slightest bit tempted by her own alluring aura. A cold glint flashed through the eyes of the Snake Beauty with dark purple hair. Then, she turned her head and ordered a female Snake Beauty, whose cultivation had reached the peak of the 8th stage of Emperor Wu. "Yes, Imperial Concubine." Wang Shui's respectful voice had just fallen when her snake tail, emitting an eerie cold light, had already whipped in front of Yuhauran. In response, Yuhauran did not panic in the slightest. Using the power of the law of speed, he quickly retreated. At the same time, a 9-colored dragon rushed out from his chest with a roar. "This is..." When she saw the 9-colored dragon, the eyes of the Imperial Concubine Snake Beauty, whose snake tail was erected on the surface of the lake, flashed a look of reminiscence. "Roar!" The 9-colored dragon that rushed out from Yuhauran's chest let out an incomparably pure dragon roar at Wang Shui. It was merely a sound wave formed from a pure dragon roar, but it directly shattered Wang Shui's snake tail. This also caused a trace of pain to flash across Wang Shui's beautiful face. "Destroy!" After the roar, the Hui dragon looked at Wang Shui indifferently. It opened its mouth slightly and uttered the word destroy. After the special power formed by the word destroy swept past Wang Shui, she slowly closed her eyes. The instant loss of her life force caused her to directly fall from the clouds. However, just as she fell more than 10 meters into the clouds, she was directly swept away by a strange power. "Damn it!" Seeing that Emperor Wu's confidant, whose cultivation had reached the peak of the 8th stage, was killed by the 9-colored dragon in a single exchange, the Imperial Concubine Snake Beauty, who was no longer in the mood to continue recalling the origin of the dragon, cursed inwardly. She then turned her head and ordered her 2 First Tribulation demigod subordinates behind her. "Jiang Jinjun, Jiang Hongwei, kill them immediately." "Yes, Imperial Concubine." After respectfully accepting the order like Wang Shui, the 2 First Tribulation demigod Snake Beauties instantly appeared in front of Yuhauran. However, when facing the 2 First Tribulation demigods that suddenly appeared in front of him, Yuhauran, whose temperament had already been replaced by the vicissitudes of life, did not reveal the slightest bit of panic. Instead, he grinned at the 2 Snake Beauties. Not good. As First Tribulation demigods, their sensitivity to dangerous auras was far stronger than experts like Emperor Wu. They felt a strong and fatal threat from Yuhauran, whose temperament had suddenly changed. After secretly cursing, the 2 First Tribulation demigod Snake Beauties planned to withdraw and retreat. However, Yuhauran, who was grinning, directly drew out the celestial trapping sword. "Sword come, sword go." Accompanied by Yuhauran's calm shout, the celestial trapping sword shot out a sword aura that was not very sharp. It instantly caught up with the two first tribulation demigod snake beauties. Then, the sword aura automatically split into two gentle sword lights that crossed the barriers of time and space, respectively piercing into the eyebrows of the two snake beauties. Chapter 1722. On the Crouching Dragon Lake. Hiss! In the same encounter, a seemingly ordinary sword technique had taken away two of the clan's top false god experts. This made the snake beauty, who was called the imperial concubine, gasp. At the same time, the eyes of the 100-headed snake beauty behind her were filled with fear. Little salamander, you also know that the bloodline essence of the snake beauty's inheritance has a heaven-defying effect on your master, so there are some things that I don't need to tell you too much. Ignoring the fearful eyes of the snake beauties, Thaling, who was controlling Yuhauran's body, reminded the Hui dragon, who was quietly floating in the clouds. Roar! Nodding its massive dragon head, the Hui dragon let out a deafening roar towards the sky, before charging straight towards the 100-headed snake beauty standing on the surface of the lake. At the same time, Thaling also waved the unsheathed immortal trapping sword and charged toward the snake beauty, who was the strongest on the lake. Kill! Seeing Yuhauran, whose body was controlled by Thaling, and the 9-colored dragon, who brought him infinite pressure, all of them charged toward the snake beauty floating on the lake. The blood in Pallas's body was gradually boiling. After a roar, he drew the immortal slaying sword and charged toward the dozen snake beauties below the 7th stage realm of Emperor Wu. Boom! After only one exchange, the snake beauty, who had retreated dozens of steps, had a look of horror in her eyes. She immediately wanted to retreat and return to the palace at the bottom of the lake. Because in the exchange just now, not only did she use the most powerful secret technique of her bloodline inheritance, but she also used a Divine Realm clan treasure. And the result? The Divine Realm treasure was directly cut in half by the opponent's sword chi, which forced her to retreat and at the same time, caused her to suffer a certain degree of injury. The snake beauty was a snake that acted decisively. Since she already had the thought of retreating in her heart, she did not hesitate to dive to the bottom of the lake. Even if you are a true Divine Realm expert, you can forget about escaping from me, purple spirit, let alone a false god of the first tribulation demigod realm. Thaling sneered in disdain when he saw the imperial concubine trying to escape into the lake. He then waved his immortal trapping sword. An unimaginably sharp sword chi slashed open a vacuum fissure that was thousands of meters deep on the surface of the lake. This caused the snake concubine, who had just touched the lake water, to be instantly replaced by fear. Just as the sharp sword chi that split the lake water was about to kill the snake consort, a terrifying water arrow that caused the souls of countless creatures to tremble shot out from the palace at the bottom of the lake. It directly destroyed the sharp sword chi and also saved the snake consort who had already closed her eyes and waited for death. A fully awakened godly state expert. Thaling muttered to himself with a gloomy expression as he looked at the water arrow that Annihilation used the immortal trapping sword's origin energy. At the same time, the 9-colored dragon and Pallas immediately gave up on pursuing the remaining snake beauties and quickly returned to Thaling's side. Friend, for the sake of this emperor, can you spare my clansmen? Just as Thaling pointed out the opponent's cultivation level, a relatively polite tone of discussion came from the palace at the bottom of the lake. Thaling, you can stop, but you have to agree to 3 of my requests. Yuhauran knew that the godly state expert of the Snake Beauty clan had personally taken action. He was afraid that his plan to continue collecting enough Snake Beauty blood essence would have to be put on hold for the time being. Thinking of the rules set by the 4 great guardian families, the 5 great hidden inherited families, and the 7 great sects, he knew that the Snake Beauty god expert who had already violated the rules would definitely not dare to continue attacking. Otherwise, violating the rules set by the 16 top forces would be the same as openly provoking them. No force in the Tianxian continent could withstand the combined revenge of the 16 top forces. Therefore, even though he knew that the other party was an immortal with earth-shattering power, Yu Haoran still planned to ruthlessly cut off a piece of flesh from the other party before leaving Crouching Dragon Lake. I can spare your clansmen, but you have to agree to 3 of my requests. Thaling, who knew that he was not good at negotiations, immediately handed over control of his physical body and allowed Yu Haoran to personally negotiate with the other party. However, considering that the other party was a godly state divine beast, even if it used its origin source, it could possibly severely injure Yu Haoran. Therefore, even though he had handed over control of his physical body, Thaling's soul did not leave his physical body. This was so that if Yu Haoran was in danger, he would be able to lend a hand immediately. Please speak. Although Yu Haoran's temperament had changed from a sea of mulberry fields to a young and delicate one, the attitude of the godly state expert in the depths of the palace at the bottom of the lake did not change at all. First, immediately release Ryun and Ryun. Since he had the confidence that the other party would not dare to act rashly, Yu Haoran's attitude when he put forward his requests was very firm. No problem. Although the crimes committed by Ryun and Ryun made them unforgivable sinners, compared to the survival of the tribe, it was acceptable to hand over the 2 sinners who had completely turned into trash. Therefore, the godly state expert in the palace at the bottom of the lake agreed readily. Second, 5 drops of heart-devouring cold marrow venom of the peak 9th grade martial emperor realm. Yu Haoran was not surprised that the other party would agree to his first request so readily. Then, he raised his second request. The heart-devouring cold marrow venom was a type of venom specially cultivated from the snake beauty's poisonous fangs. Although it did not enter the ranking of the 100 poisons in Tianxian continent, the power of the venom was not inferior to that of the soul-devouring spirit. Out of the 5 drops of heart-devouring cold marrow venom, 1 drop would be used to refine a poisonous pill that could harm a demigod. The other 4 drops would be given to his 2 disciples, so that they could use the venom contained in the heart-devouring cold marrow venom to improve their cultivation in the poison Tao. Faced with Yu Haoran's second request, the godly state expert in the palace at the bottom of the lake thought for a while and finally nodded in agreement. Sure. Yu Haoran was not surprised that the other party could agree to the second request that seemed a little overboard. He continued to raise his third request. The third request is 13 types of level 2 grade 9 medicinal herbs. They are the fire spiritual herb, blood spiritual herb, fire heart 7-leaf flower, heart-breaking fruit. No problem. For a tribe that had been passed down from the ancient times, the snake beauty had accumulated countless precious and rare herbs due to their special survival habits and their lack of experience in experiencing great changes. Not to mention 13 types of second-tier, 9th-grade exotic flowers and herbs, even if it was 13 types of first-tier, first-grade divine herbs, it wasn't like they couldn't take it out. Chapter 1723. On the Crouching Dragon Lake. After getting the other party's agreement, Yu Haoran took the initiative to put away the nightmare dragon and the celestial trapping sword to show his sincerity. After seeing Yu Haoran's sincerity in taking the initiative to stop, the godly state expert in the palace at the bottom of the lake ordered his clansmen to prepare the request he had just agreed to. He mentioned the poison and exotic flowers, as well as the sisters Ru-Yin and Ru-Yun. At the same time, he signaled the remaining 30-plus snake beauties on the lake to quickly return to the palace at the bottom of the lake. Looking at the dozens of snake beauties floating on the lake's surface, the godly state expert in the palace at the bottom of the lake couldn't help but sigh softly. This was because most of these corpses were venerable state and emperor state experts. They were direct descendants of the clan that had been carefully cultivated for thousands or even tens of thousands of years. After sighing softly, the godly state expert planned to bury all of them in the Snake Beauty's ancestral land. When their souls could return to the arms of their ancestors, Thaling, who had quickly returned to the space of the Sea of Consciousness, immediately mobilized the origin energy of the victor and forcibly took away all of the Snake Beauty's corpses. Even a godly state expert like himself couldn't stop the power of the corpses of his clansmen from being taken away. While the expert in the palace at the bottom of the lake was shocked, he immediately rejoiced at his decision to take a step back. Otherwise, with the other party's strength that wasn't inferior to the martial god state, not only could he turn the entire clan upside down, but he could also possibly discover the plan that they had secretly planned for countless years. The preparation time wasn't very long. Just as Thaling used the victor to take away all of the Snake Beauty's corpses, 3 venerable state female Snake Beauties escorted the sisters Ru-Yin and Ru-Yun to the surface of the lake. Ru-Yin and Ru-Yun, who had originally thought that they were going to be executed, had a desolate look in their eyes. However, when they saw the blue-clothed youth floating in the air and saw the faint confident smile on his face, their eyes immediately lit up with joy. In a flash, he appeared in front of Ru-Yin and Ru-Yun. After taking the storage ring from one of the Snake Beauties, Yuhauran stretched out his hands to hold the sisters' waists and soared into the air to leave the crouching dragon lake. Third granduncle, you're about to fully awaken. Why didn't you directly kill that human monster? Instead, you took the initiative to step back and humiliated yourself by agreeing to his request? After Yuhauran left Crouching Dragon Lake with Ru-Yin and Ru-Yun, a third tribulation demigod Snake Beauty with long purple hair bent his body slightly and asked into the depths of the palace. Shao Qian, as the ruler of the race, your responsibility is to lead the entire race to become stronger, not just focus on your own cultivation. Faced with the long purple hair Snake Beauty's interrogation, the godly realm expert in the depths of the palace criticized with a serious tone. Third granduncle, Xian Qian knows his mistake. I will pay attention in the future. Faced with her third granduncle's criticism, the Snake Beauty called Little Qian immediately lowered her head and admitted her mistake. However, a trace of disdain flashed in his eyes, indicating that he did not take the other party's criticism to heart. Shao Qian, first of all, I haven't fully recovered. Right now, I can barely unleash the strength of a peak third tribulation demigod. Seeing that Xian Qian had already realized his mistake, the third granduncle nodded in satisfaction before explaining why he had chosen to step back earlier. Secondly, if I were to forcefully take action now, I would definitely alarm the Vermilion Bird clan of the 4 Guardian clans and the He clan of the Hidden Lineage clan. With the strength that we have accumulated now, we are temporarily unable to withstand the revenge of the 2 lineage clans. Lastly, speaking to this point, the third granduncle looked in the direction that Yuhauran had disappeared in through the water of Crouching Dragon Lake and said with a trace of fear in his voice, there is an extremely terrifying power hidden in that young man's sea of consciousness. I think that even if he recovers the strength of a peak third stage godly realm, he might not be a match for that power. After hearing his third granduncle's explanation, a trace of surprise flashed across Xian Qian's eyes as he lowered his head. At the peak of a mountain thousands of miles away from Crouching Dragon Lake, Ru-Yun was leaning on a green rock. Her eyes were filled with excitement, rejoicing, regret, helplessness, inferiority, and other complex emotions as she looked at Yuhauran. As for Ru-Yin, after experiencing the joy of surviving a calamity, she had once again sunk into a state of utter despair due to her terrible condition. Senior Ru-Yin, Senior Ru-Yun, don't worry too much. I have a way to let you return to your peak state. Seeing the dejected Ru-Yin and the complicated Ru-Yun, Yuhauran knew how they were feeling at the moment and smiled as he comforted them. Young hero Yu, thank you for saving our lives. Yuhauran's consolation caused Ru-Yun to quickly calm down from her complicated emotions. She extended her hand to pick up a few strands of hair that had fallen in front of her forehead. She solemnly thanked Yuhauran before speaking with a bitter smile. However, you really don't have to worry about us sisters because we understand our own situation better than you do. The meridians in her body were all broken, her dantian was completely destroyed, her sea of consciousness was on the verge of collapse, and her ancestral bloodline had been forcefully extracted. Even if a core god expert were to appear, they would probably be helpless in the face of such terrible physical conditions. Senior Ru-Yun, you and I are old acquaintances. You should know Yu Haoran's character and personality. Since I said that I could let you return to your peak state, then I naturally have a way and means to do so. After smiling and replying to Ru-Yun's persuasion, Yu Haoran directly sat down cross-legged and took out the 13 level 2 9th grade medicinal ingredients that he had just obtained from negotiating with the Snake Beauty. The level 2 1st grade 9 Sun Spirit sculpting pill can forcefully reconnect the torn meridians and blood vessels and repair the collapsed dantian and sea of consciousness. While using the method of forming seals with his 10 fingers to condense a completely transparent independent space of the dantian fire, Yu Haoran explained in detail the pill he planned to refine and its effects. A pill that could reconnect the blood vessels and meridians and repair the dantian and sea of consciousness. Hearing Yu Haoran's introduction, Ru-Yun's expression was slightly shocked. Ru-Yin suddenly raised her head and looked at him with an incredulous look in her eyes. Seniors, I only occasionally heard about your encounters during this period of time, but I don't know much about the specific process. The refining process of the level 2 1st grade 9 Sun Spirit sculpting pill was not very complicated. With his current alchemy cultivation at the peak of the Alchemy Emperor realm, he could easily refine it even with his eyes closed. Therefore, while refining the medicinal ingredients for refining pills, Yu Haoran also wanted to know why the sisters Ru-Yin and Ru-Yun wanted to kill the only son of the patriarch, the only heir of the Snake Beauty tribe, causing them to suffer such a disaster. Chapter 1724. Yu Haoran couldn't help but sigh after listening to Ru-Yin's narration of the entire process of the sisters' calamity. In fact, the reason for the calamity that the Ru-Yin sisters encountered was very cliché. It was nothing more than the young clan leader of the Snake Beauty clan taking a fancy to Ru-Yin's devastatingly beautiful appearance as well as her noble temperament like that of a fairy of the 9th heaven. She wanted to use her as a furnace. However, the arrogant Ru-Yin simply looked down on the trash of a young clan leader. Moreover, with her extraordinary talent and strength, she had humiliated the young clan leader more than once. And the result? Ru-Yin was deceived into losing her virginity, and Ru-Yun was sealed when she shed her mortal body. The mastermind behind the scenes was the young clan leader. Although he had successfully removed Ru-Yun's seal on Qingyun Peak at the 100 Qi Gate and helped her recover her strength at the peak of the 9th level Sage Realm, her damaged foundation hadn't recovered. With the recovery of the world's spiritual energy, the heavenly Tao's rules gradually fell into a deep slumber. More and more martial venerables and Emperor Wu experts in hiding appeared. Ru-Yin's cultivation and strength couldn't continue to increase, and her situation became more and more difficult. In the end, after a venerable realm ancestor of the direct bloodline appeared, the young clan leader directly chose to use force to forcibly seize Ru-Yun. In order to protect her virginity, and also for the trace of unrealistic fantasy in her heart, Ru-Yun finally chose to overdraw 90% of her life force. When she killed the venerable realm ancestor, she didn't even let the young clan leader off. Ru-Yin, who had a deep sisterly relationship, was naturally the only accomplice. For the Snake Beauty clan who valued the inheritance of pure bloodline, the tragic death of the only young clan leader was equivalent to severing the inheritance of the entire clan, directly destroying the future of the Snake Beauty clan. Therefore, the Snake Beauty clan who had completely fallen into a violent rage would give the Ru-Yin sisters inhumane torture. This was also the fundamental reason why the Snake Beauty clan reacted so agitatedly when they heard that he was a friend of the Ru-Yin sisters. Fortunately, The support of Ru Yin's hatred and the persistence of Ru Yun's concern allowed them to withstand the pain caused by the torture until Yu Haoran rescued them. Yu Haoran, as long as you can help us sisters recover from our injuries, then we are willing to be your slaves. Furthermore, I can let you experience the unique ventriloquism of the snake beauty. I guarantee that you will be unable to extricate yourself from it. The more she talked about the suffering she had suffered, the deeper the resentment in Ru Yin's heart. In order to have the power to take revenge on the entire tribe, she did not hesitate to sell her dignity and soul. No matter how strong Yu Haoran's mental fortitude was, when faced with Ru Yin mentioning the famous ventriloquism of the Tianxian continent, Yu Haoran immediately felt a surge of anger in his abdomen. He could not help but start to fantasize. Sis! There was no problem with the promise of being a slave or a maid, but how could he bring up that kind of special ventriloquism? This caused Ru Yun to blush and remind him. Ru Yun's tender voice reminded Yu Haoran to immediately wake up from his fantasies. He immediately adjusted his overflowing emotions and focused all of his energy on refining the pill. He did not dare to casually communicate with the fiery Ru Yin, nor did he dare to see the sister's cherry-like lips. Otherwise, he suspected that he might have agreed to the promise that Ru Yin mentioned just now. As he focused all of his attention, the speed of refining the pill immediately increased by a lot. Half an hour later, 9 pills emitting a strange fragrance were successfully refined. After putting away 7 of the pills, Yu Haoran used his mind to control the remaining 2 pills. They floated in front of Ru Yin and Ru Yun and then reminded them with a serious expression. Senior Ru Yin, Senior Ru Yun, although the first rank 9 Sun Spirit sculpting pill of the second rank can allow you to regain the strength of your peak state, it cannot make up for the loss of your ancestral bloodline. After hearing Yu Haoran's reminder, Ru Yun's reaction was very calm. This was because in her opinion, although the ancestral bloodline could increase the speed of cultivation and increase one's strength, if one truly wanted to climb to the peak of the martial way and walk one's own path of martial way, the ancestral bloodline's inheritance would instead be a kind of shackle. However, Ru Yin, whose state of mind and temperament were far inferior to her sister's, revealed a trace of disappointment in her eyes. Fortunately, Ru Yun's persuasion and the joy of surviving a disaster allowed her to adjust her state of mind in the end. She then used the first rank 9 Sun Spirit sculpting pill of the second rank to recover her strength. Taking advantage of the time that Ru Yin and Ru Yun used the pill to recover their strength, Yu Haoran closed his eyes and began to use the blood essence refined from Thaling to accelerate the transformation of the law of life and death. At the same time, he continued to comprehend the true essence of life and the mysteries of death. Ru Yin, who was the most talented and had a better state of mind, was the first to use the first rank 9 Sun Spirit sculpting pill of the second rank to recover from her injuries. However, the moment her injuries and cultivation were completely healed, a terrifying energy suddenly erupted from her blood, meridians, body, dantian, and sea of consciousness. She didn't need to control it at all and directly broke through the bottleneck of the realm, her cultivation directly breaking through to the venerable realm. Ru Yin, who recovered from her injuries, also erupted with a terrifying energy that allowed her cultivation to smoothly advance to the venerable realm. The powerful aura formed by the breakthrough of the venerable realm made Yu Haoran unable to calm down and continue to comprehend the true essence and mysteries of the realm. In helplessness, he could only temporarily stop his cultivation and quietly observe the situation of Ru Yin and Ru Yin's breakthrough. Whether it was in terms of talent, temperament, or personal comprehension and accumulation, Ru Yun was far superior to Ru Yin. When Ru Yun relied on the terrifying energy that erupted from her body to assist her cultivation to break through to the peak of the 6th grade of the Venerable Realm, Ru Yin barely advanced to the peak of the 2nd grade of the Venerable Realm. At the same time, from the extent of the increase in her aura, she had at most broken through to the early stage of the third grade of the Venerable Realm. The final result was just as he had guessed. After Ru-Yin broke through to the early stage of the third grade of the Venerable Realm, the energy that erupted from her body was completely exhausted. However, even though her cultivation breakthrough was far inferior to Ru-Yun's, Ru-Yin wasn't jealous at all. This was because other than Ru-Yun, who was her sister, she couldn't imagine that Ru-Yin could advance to the early stage of the third grade of the Venerable Realm in such a short period of time. All of this was brought to her by this handsome young man in front of her. When she thought of this, Ru-Yin didn't have any thoughts to consolidate her breakthrough. She looked at Yu Haoran with a trace of confusion in her eyes, and at the same time, she stuck out her tongue that was slightly softer and longer than a normal person's. Yu Haoran, who had finally dispelled the distracting thoughts in his heart, saw Ru-Yin's charming appearance at this moment, and the anger in his abdomen immediately began to rise. Chapter 1725. Ru-Yun's powerful aura when he advanced to the early 7th level of the Exalted Realm, and his decisive shout woke Ru-Yin from her dazed state, allowing Yu Haoran to successfully suppress the distracting thoughts in his heart. Whether it was the woman with the enchantment bloodline or Ru-Yin's bewilderment just now, he was unable to control the emergence of distracting thoughts. This made him gradually realize that there must be a problem with his recent cultivation. Otherwise, with his powerful state of mind and the experience of living two lives, he should not have been so easily distracted in the face of temptation. While Ru-Yin and Ru-Yun were consolidating their cultivation, Yu Haoran checked his condition and discussed with Thaling in his sea of consciousness. Yu Haoran, don't worry. There are no hidden dangers in your cultivation so far. Thaling thought for a moment and comforted him with a smile after hearing Yu Haoran's worries and troubles. Thaling, why was I able to face Ru-Yin's charm calmly in the past, but why was I so distracted in the face of her temptation now? Thaling's words of comfort did not dispel Yu Haoran's doubts at all. Yu Haoran, the reason why you were unable to resist the temptation of the women of the succubi and Ru-Ru's marriage is not because your willpower is lacking, nor is there a problem with your cultivation. It's because of the special charm they possess. To all living beings with flesh and blood, they possess an irresistible temptation. Really? Yu Haoran still questioned in disbelief. Yu Haoran, if you don't believe me, you can ask Pallas now. Ask him about his thoughts when he faced Ru-Yin and Ru-Yin, Thaling suggested with a smile, ignoring Yu Haoran's doubts. Brother Qi, did you have any special thoughts when you faced Ru-Yin and Ru-Yun? Although it was a little rude to ask Pallas this question directly, he could only force himself to ask in order to eliminate the troubles in his heart and not affect his future cultivation and breakthroughs. Brother Yu, do you know why I was avoiding the mermaid named Qingro? Do you know why I stayed away from the sisters? In the face of Yu Haoran's questioning, Pallas did not directly answer, but he confirmed Thaling's explanation through two rhetorical questions, which made him feel relieved. Ru-Yin, who had advanced to the early stage of the 7th level, had the ability to protect herself. Yu Haoran thought of the temptation Ru-Yin emitted when she fell into confusion, the possible crisis Fengrun City might encounter, Qin Lingfei and the sword without trace in Xianyang City's Prince Mansion, and the time when the tomb of the great god Jinyuan was opening was getting closer. Yu Haoran thought of leaving immediately. From Victor's and his own storage rings, he selected 10 spiritual veins, several magic tools at the peak of the Exalt realm, several top-notch escape talismans, and a dozen or so healing pills. After placing them in an empty storage ring, he quietly placed them on a blue stone in front of Ru-Yun. Afterwards, he used his spiritual sense to inform Pallas, then soared into the sky and left the mountain, heading straight for Fengrun City thousands of miles away. Half an hour later, Ru-Yun, who had consolidated her breakthrough, slowly opened her eyes. Her eyes were filled with endless joy as she looked for the person who had given her a new life and made her miss him day and night. However, when she saw the empty mountain peak and the storage ring on the bluestone in front of her, the joy in her eyes was instantly replaced by disappointment. She reached out her hand towards the storage ring on the bluestone, and the storage ring slowly fell into her hand. She then entered the space within the storage ring with her spiritual sense. After seeing the 10 spiritual veins of the 5th and 6th level, several top-notch Exalt Realm magic tools, several top-notch escape talismans, and a dozen or so different types of pills in the storage ring, Ru Yun's heart was filled with warmth, and she finally made a bold decision. Since he knew the exact coordinates of Fengrun City, Yu Haoran directly used the method of tearing the void 100 miles away from the mountain peak where Ru Yun and Ru Yun were at. He successfully returned to Fengrun City the moment Ru Yun finished consolidating her cultivation. "Master, you're back." Seeing Yu Haoran suddenly appear in the city lord's courtyard, Xiang Muling, who was barbecuing a first-grade 8th-level thorn bird in the courtyard, immediately threw away the food in her hand and happily rushed to his side. "I'm hungry again." Looking at the 2-meter-tall thorn bird and the 3-meter-tall redwood boar beside the fire, Yu Haoran's eyes were filled with a trace of doting. 7 days ago, after successfully quelling and pacifying the internal strife in Fengrun City, he was in a dilemma as to what to do with Xiang Muling, who refused to leave him no matter what. This was because no matter if it was using the yin-yang fire to refine the energy within the black and white wings, discussing the future cultivation plans with Thaling, or arranging the methods to deal with the Great Han Empire's revenge, they all required an absolutely secluded and quiet space. At the same time, with Xiang Muling's miserable life experience, he couldn't bear to scold her harshly. He was even more unwilling to see the sadness on her face when she was chased away. In the end, under Thaling's suggestion, Yu Haoran could only make an exception and take her as his disciple. He also planned to arrange for her to be taken care of by Qin Lingfei and the sword without trace when he returned to Xianyang City. Seeing that her master had already noticed the 2 exotic beasts she secretly killed, Xiang Muling was like a child who was caught doing something wrong by an adult. She lowered her head and admitted it embarrassedly. "Silly girl, didn't I already tell you that no matter what you want to eat and when you want to eat, you can arrange for the servants to prepare it for you?" Originally, he wanted to reach out and stroke Xiang Muling's head, but he saw that even if he raised his hand, he could barely touch her ear. In the end, he could only lightly pat her arm and remind her, "Master, I don't want to trouble others." There was a hint of dissatisfaction in his reminder. Xiang Muling was afraid that her master would get angry and leave her, so she hurriedly explained, "You!" Knowing what happened to Xiang Muling in the past, Yu Haoran didn't want to trouble others, so he didn't say anything more. Looking at the thorn bird that was almost done roasting and the redwood boar that hadn't been processed yet, Yu Haoran thought about Xiang Muling's special physique and the need for food. After replacing his helpless expression with a smile, Yu Haoran gently reminded her, "Muling, I have some things to discuss with General Lan and the others. Continue to enjoy your delicacies, but don't forget to cultivate properly after you're full." "Yes, master." Chapter 1726. Fengrun City, the City Lord's Mansion. After listening to Lan Rong's detailed report, Yu Haoran, who was sitting on the armchair in the study of the City Lord's Mansion, frowned slightly. Originally, according to his initial expectations, the Great Han Empire, which had suffered 5 consecutive losses, would definitely gather millions of elite soldiers in a short period of time and retake Fengrun City at all costs, whether it was to eliminate the hidden threat behind the Empire or to obtain the 9 mythical beast corpses hidden in the mythical beast mountain. This was also the main reason why he was in a hurry to return to Fengrun City. However, according to the informants that Lan Rong had arranged, the Great Han Empire had indeed gathered more than 5 million elite soldiers recently. Moreover, it was the Emperor himself who led the expedition. However, the goal of the expedition was not Fengrun City, but the more powerful central region. for the Ministry of War and the imperial family of the Great Han Empire to neglect the hidden threat behind and temporarily give up the 9 mythical beast corpses. Something must have happened in the Tianxian continent during this period of time. Prince Consort, shouldn't we contact His Majesty? As someone who had been on the battlefield for decades, Lan Rong instinctively thought that the Great Han Empire's sudden change in the goal of the expedition was most likely related to the Great Emperor Qin Empire's plan to conquer the central region. Therefore, after thinking about it, he could not help but take the initiative to remind Lan Rong. Lan Rong's reminder made Yu Haoran immediately realize the connection between the two matters. He quickly took out a top-notch communication jade talisman and recorded his doubts in detail. Then, he sent it to Qin Lingfei, who was far away in the prince's mansion in Xianyang City. At the same time, considering that Qin Lingfei was not at the front line of the expedition and did not know much about the situation of the army, he took out another top-notch communication jade talisman and sent it to Meng Zhenkai, who was once again on the battlefield. After that, Yu Haoran closed his eyes and began to wait. He was waiting for Qin Lingfei and Meng Zhenkai's replies. Fortunately, the top-notch communication jade talisman was very fast. In just 5 minutes, he received Qin Lingfei's reply. After reading the contents of Qin Lingfei's reply, Yu Haoran's expression suddenly shook as he cried out involuntarily, "Peak 9th grade Martial Revered Realm." Hearing Yu Haoran's exclamation, Lan Rong, Han Guangbei, and the others who were waiting in the study revealed a trace of doubt in their eyes. They glanced at each other, but no one dared to take the initiative to ask. Although Yu Haoran also noticed the eye contact between Lan Rong and the others, he had no intention of explaining. After closing his eyes again, he waited for Meng Zhenkai's reply while thinking about the changes in Emperor Qin's body. Qin Lingfei's reply was very simple. She said that Emperor Qin's expedition to the central region was very smooth. Moreover, Emperor Qin, who personally led the expedition, had successfully advanced to the peak of the 9th level of the Exalted Realm. It was because of this that he was extremely shocked. Previously, when they were debating whether the expedition's target was the East region or the Central region, Emperor Qin's cultivation had only just broken through to the early 2nd level of the Martial Revered Realm by using the high-quality soul fire that he had given him. Now, only half a month had passed since the debate. With Emperor Qin's talent and accumulation, it was very difficult for him to raise his cultivation by one small level, let alone break through 7 small levels consecutively to reach the peak of the 9th level of the Martial Revered Realm. Just as Yu Haoran was wondering why Emperor Qin's cultivation had advanced by leaps and bounds, the communication jade talisman in his hand, which was used to contact Meng Zhenkai, suddenly vibrated violently. This forced him to temporarily suppress his doubts and use his mind to read the message in the communication jade talisman. Luck. According to the message that Meng Zhenkai had left in the communication jade talisman, Emperor Qin's cultivation had directly advanced to the peak of the 9th level of the Martial Revered Realm in just half a month. The reason was that the Northern Expedition Army had been conquering hundreds of cities and sections. In a short period of time, they had gathered a large amount of destiny from the central region. The Qin Emperor had relied on the support of this huge amount of destiny to finally achieve a rapid improvement in his cultivation. Although Meng Zhenkai's explanation seemed reasonable, Yu Haoran knew that this situation was absolutely abnormal. First of all, there was an abundance of spiritual qi of heaven and earth, rich cultivation resources, and complete martial arts inheritance. The cruel competition environment made the inherited families and sects in the central region not only very strong, but also fierce and combative. It was very difficult for them to voluntarily surrender. Secondly, although the army of the Great Qin Empire in this expedition to the central region was said to have over 10 million elite soldiers, in reality, more than half of the elite soldiers were only new recruits at the martial warrior and martial master realm. The cultivation, strength, knowledge, and courage of these new soldiers were not of much use and would even slow down the army's progress. In other words, in just half a month, with the strength and speed of the expedition to the north, it was impossible for them to conquer hundreds of cities and sections. Lastly, and most importantly, the luck that could be gathered from hundreds of cities and sects could not be compared to the huge amount of luck that had been gathered from the entire southern region. With the huge amount of luck that had gathered from the entire southern region, and with the help of a large number of top-notch elixirs, Emperor Qin had finally broken through to the ordinary martial revered realm. Then, how could the luck that was far inferior to the entire southern region allow Emperor Qin to break through the bottleneck of 7 small realms and reach the peak of 9th-grade martial revered realm in one go? When he thought up to here, Yu Haoran instantly had a strong feeling that someone was secretly manipulating the great Qin Empire's northern expedition plan and process, and that someone was secretly providing countless unimaginable assistance. Even the sudden change in the Great Han Empire's target could very well be directly related to that person or that force. Thinking that Emperor Qin might have secretly reached an agreement with a force with ulterior motives, or be secretly controlled by someone, he immediately wanted to return to Xianyang City and then go to the expedition to the north to understand the situation. Compared to opening up the rear for future refuge, Emperor Qin's safety and the survival of tens of millions of elite soldiers were more important. Therefore, Yu Haoran suddenly stood up and ordered Lan Rong. "General Lan, I will be leaving Fengrun City for a period of time. Your mission is to defend Fengrun City, and then use the special environment of Qinghu Mountain Range and the cultivation resources that I left behind to increase your own strength and the army's strength." Originally, the Great Han Empire had transferred 5 million elite soldiers to the central region, which would definitely cause the defense at the rear to be weakened. It was a good opportunity for them to expand their territory. However, due to the influence of the top powerhouses of the left army, without the protection of himself and the Scarlet Loathe, and without the protection of the defensive formation of the sun, moon, and stars, a rash expedition could very well lead to the danger of being completely annihilated. After all, the strongest people in the left army, Lan Rong and Qian Guangbei, were only at the peak of 9th-grade martial saint. He could only temporarily give up this golden opportunity. Chapter 1727. After leaving the study in a flash, Yu Haoran called out to Pallas, who was sitting cross-legged on the fake mountain. Then, he grabbed Xiang Muling's arm and soared into the sky, heading straight for the Qinghu Mountain Range. Due to the fact that the distance between the east and west of the Qinghu Mountain Range had far exceeded the distance that could be covered by the void-tearing mystic technique, in order to avoid any accidents that might delay his journey in time, he could only temporarily use the assistance of the law of speed and speed to fly towards the southern region. After spending close to 20 minutes, he finally crossed the entire Qinghu Mountain Range. Then, using the method of tearing the void, it took him another 5 minutes to return to the prince's mansion. After introducing Xiang Muling's background and identity to Qin Lingfei and the sword without trace in detail, and instructing Pallas to wait in the prince's mansion, Yu Haoran headed straight for the backyard of the imperial city. "Greetings, Prince Consort." Seeing Yu Haoran descend from the sky, the beautiful palace maids of the Palace of Compassionate and Peaceful immediately knelt down to greet him. However, there was confusion in their eyes. Yu Haoran's attitude towards the Empress Dowager had always been lukewarm due to his relationship with Qin Bojun of the imperial clan court. In the past year since his marriage with the princess, he had never taken the initiative to greet the Empress Dowager, let alone take the initiative to greet her. "Is the Empress Dowager here?" Yu Haoran asked indifferently after gesturing for the beautiful palace maids to rise. In reply to Prince Consort, "The Empress Dowager is cultivating in seclusion in the Purple Fate Pavilion," the leading palace maid replied. "Cultivating in seclusion." After hearing the leading palace maid's reply, Yu Haoran couldn't help but furrow his brows. The reason why he hadn't rushed to the central region was because he needed to understand the various actions of the Northern Expedition Army in detail after the start of the war. He also needed to find out if there were any strange clues. According to the military discipline set by the founding Emperor Qin Empire, the empire had to leave behind two very detailed and complete records for every expedition. Firstly, it was convenient to calculate the rewards and punishments of the elite generals. Secondly, they could make use of the lessons learned from their successes and failures. Thirdly, it was an important teaching material that the Ministry of War and the imperial family used to teach their descendant. There were two complete records, one of which was kept in the Master Guardian Hall of the Ministry of War, and the other was kept in the Sutra Depository of the Imperial Palace. Regardless of whether it was the Teacher Guarding Hall of the Ministry of War or the Sutra Depository of the Imperial Palace, one would need the Emperor Qin's Imperial Edict or the Phoenix ceremonial token of the Empress Dowager Zixian to enter. Emperor Qin was currently in the Northern Punitive Expedition in the Central Region, so he could only come to Empress Dowager Zixian to ask for the Phoenix ceremonial token. Otherwise, with his attitude of disliking Zixian, how could he take the initiative to visit her? Emperor's son-in-law, before the Empress Dowager went into seclusion, she left a message that she would be in seclusion for a month. Everyone in Xianying City knew about Yu Haoran's audacious character. Therefore, after seeing his frown, the leading palace maid became nervous. Now, there are less than 3 days before the Empress Dowager comes out of seclusion. It's too long. Not to mention 3 days, even if it was 3 hours, he couldn't afford to waste any more time. Therefore, after complaining a little impatiently, Yu Haoran directly mobilized Emperor Wu's peak level 5 divine thought to force his way into the Purple Fate Pavilion. Suddenly, the door of the Purple Fate Pavilion opened. Then, Zixian, who looked like a young girl, walked out of the Purple Fate Pavilion with a radiant expression. When he saw Zixian walk out of the Purple Fate Pavilion and her cultivation had reached the peak level 5 martial honorable realm, Yu Haoran couldn't help but be surprised. "Who is it?" Yu Haoran's surprised voice immediately alarmed Zixian, who had just reached the peak level 5 martial honorable realm. After questioning him with a fierce look, she immediately used her divine thought to track the source of the surprised voice. "Emperor's son-in-law, why have you come to my palace of peace and tranquility?" After seeing Yu Haoran appear in the palace of compassionate and peaceful, Zixian was very surprised. At the same time, she appeared in front of him in a flash and asked with a puzzled look in her eyes. "Half a month ago, you were just an ordinary peak level 1 martial honorable realm. Now, you have reached the peak level 5 martial honorable realm." Ignoring Zixian's questioning, Yu Haoran frowned and asked, "Tell me immediately, what kind of heaven-defying opportunity did you get during this period of time? Yu Haoran, don't you think that your request just now was too much?" Wanting to know the reason why her cultivation had improved by leaps and bounds recently, Zixian, who was originally gentle, immediately asked with a gloomy face. "I'm sorry, I was too abrupt," Zixian asked sternly. Yu Haoran immediately realized his rashness just now and quickly lowered his head to apologize. Forget it. For the arrogant and disrespectful Yu Haoran to take the initiative to apologize, the anger and dissatisfaction in Zixian's heart immediately subsided. Her expression gradually relaxed as she waved her hand to indicate that it was fine. "Empress Dowager, I need to enter the Master Guard Hall of the Ministry of War to look at some very important information, so I need to borrow your Phoenix ritual token for now." Zixian's cultivation had improved by leaps and bounds in such a short period of time, which further confirmed Yu Haoran's guess. This made him even more worried about the safety of Emperor Qin and the Northern Expedition Army. At the same time, with the accumulated conflicts and grievances between him and Zixian, wanting to find clues from her was undoubtedly more difficult than ascending to the heavens. As such, Yu Haoran could not be bothered to continue asking about the heaven-defying opportunity she had obtained and directly stated the reason why he had appeared in the palace of Compassionate and Peaceful. Hearing Yu Haoran ask for the Phoenix ritual token that would allow him to freely enter the Ministry of War and the forbidden area of the Imperial Palace, Zi Xian could not help but frown. This was completely against the laws of the Great Qin Empire. However, when she thought of Yu Haoran's lawless personality, she knew that if she did not give him the Phoenix ritual token, it would definitely infuriate him. With Yu Haoran's powerful strength, if he forcefully entered the Master Guard Hall of the Ministry of War, no one in Xianyang City would be able to stop him. At the same time, it would also intensify the conflict between them, which was not beneficial to the ongoing Northern Expedition Army. As such, even if she was unwilling to agree to his request, for the sake of the peace of the imperial family, Zi Xian still took out a token with a divine phoenix carved on it from her sleeve. Many thanks. After taking the token from Zi Xian, Yu Haoran cupped his hands in thanks and soared into the air, heading straight for the Ministry of War. Yu Haoran's attitude of rushing to the Ministry of War immediately aroused Zi Xian's suspicions. Following which, when she thought of how he had questioned her about the reason for her sudden increase in cultivation, her expression could not help but change. This is bad. Yu Haoran might have discovered Yixin's plan. Chapter 1728. Xianyang City, Master Hall of the Ministry of War. After putting down the military book that recorded the marching records of the Northern Expedition Army, Yu Haoran's right hand tapped on the table as he slowly closed his eyes and fell into deep thought. According to the military book, ever since the Northern Expedition Army crossed Zhuanyo City of Shuangniu Mountain and officially stepped into the territory of the Central Region, regardless of whether it was the inherited families or third-rate sects, they either took the initiative to open the door and surrender or suddenly had an intense internal strife. In short, the Northern Expedition Army's campaign was not only very smooth, but the price they paid could be said to be very small. The three elders of the He clan worked together to kill the clan leader and personally led 1317 direct descendants to open the door and surrender. The sudden internal strife of the Ma clan caused the defense of Wen City to be non-existent. General Meng led 300,000 elite troops to easily take down the city. The head of the Blood Palm sect mysteriously disappeared. For the sake of fighting for the position of the head of the sect's defense power was weakened by 70%. His Majesty personally led the army to slaughter them. Yu Haoran opened his eyes and took a look at the process and results of the Northern Expedition Army's siege. His right hand that was tapping on the table suddenly stopped as he softly muttered to himself. The Green Hill Fox clan. When participating in the Hidden Dragon ranking battle in the southern region, by killing the manipulated Qin Tianyi, the mastermind behind the scenes, the Green Hill Saintess and the Fox clan's ancestor Su Wanru were forced to come out, thus exposing the Green Hill Fox clan's secret plans and conspiracies. The inherited families and sects that the Northern Expedition Army encountered during the campaign, their strange behavior was very similar to Qin Tianyi, who was manipulated. In other words, the force that secretly assisted Emperor Qin's campaign in the central region was very likely the Green Hill Fox clan of the Green Hill Mountain Range. Thinking of this, his right hand that had stopped tapping on the table started tapping again. A trace of doubt appeared in his originally clear eyes. Because Emperor Qin was different from Qin Tianyi. First of all, as the Emperor of the Great Emperor Qin Kingdom, with the protection of the country's fate and destiny, it was very difficult for the Emperor Qin to be controlled by others. Secondly, without being able to control minds, Emperor Qin's towering hatred towards the Green Hill Foxes made it impossible for him to form an alliance and fight alongside them. Finally, if Emperor Qin had temporarily set aside the vengeance in his heart due to his own ambitions and chose to work with the Green Hill Foxes, Therefore, with the cunning and cautious nature of the green hill foxes, they would definitely be wary of Emperor Qin's ambition and vengeance, and would not fully assist him in improving his cultivation and ability. That was unless there were other factions besides the Green Hill Foxes who had intervened in the northern expedition. Zhou clan. When he thought of other forces interfering, a figure flashed in Yu Haoran's mind. His expression suddenly changed and he stood up abruptly. In the southern region's demon-sealing mystic realm, the reason why the ancient demon clan was able to break the seal ahead of time was largely due to the help of Zhou Yu's and his family's experts and formation masters. Moreover, he believed that with Zhou Yu's methods, even if he could not form an alliance with the ancient demon clan in the end, he would still have the means to protect himself and safely leave the demon-sealing mystic realm. When he thought of how he and the 4 great guardian clans had resealed the ancient demon and god clans, causing the Zhou clan to lose 2 powerful allies in succession. When he thought of Zhou Yu's personality and madness, it was not impossible for him to join forces with a sinister and cunning faction like the Green Hill Foxes. At the same time, with the combination of the Immortal Ending Sword, Immortal Trapping Sword, and the 3 ocean-suppressing pearls, the Zhou clan's foundation in collecting treasures did not lose to the 4 great guardian clans in the slightest. In that case, it made sense for them to be able to use the conditions for Emperor Qin to temporarily set aside his vengeance and choose to form a temporary alliance with the Green Hill Foxes. With a true suspect in his heart, Yu Haoran once again flipped through the records in the military manual, further confirming his conjecture. Closing the thick military manual, he rose and left the great guardian hall of the Ministry of Military Personnel, taking to the skies to return to the prince's mansion. However, he did not alert anyone in the mansion, and instead quietly returned to his training room. Pagoda Spirit, what grade is the soul-severing banner? What kind of powerful effects does it possess? And what does it mean for the Green Hill Foxes? Sitting cross-legged in the training room, Yu Haoran took out the palm-sized soul-severing banner from the victor and pursued the question in a single breath. The reason why the Green Hill Foxes were feared by countless factions was not only because of the powerful attacks of their tails, but also because of their terrifying ability to control the minds of living beings. Perhaps the Green Hill Foxes could not control Emperor Qin's mind due to his identity as the emperor and the protection of the nation's fortune, but it was hard to say for the commanders and generals of the Northern Expedition Army. Therefore, before the Northern Expedition Army dealt with the Green Hill Foxes, he had to think of a way to eliminate the hidden dangers of the Green Hill Foxes' mind control. The soul-severing banner is a peak-level godly artifact that the Green Hill Foxes used to bewitch the last ruler of the Shang dynasty. Gathering the strength of the entire Shang dynasty, using the flesh and souls of 9 peak 9th grade martial gods as the foundation, and the corpses of 9 peak 9th grade martial gods as the foundation, it took 99 years to refine. Its might is comparable to a peak natural spirit treasure. Knowing the reason why Yu Haoran asked about the soul-severing banner, as well as the importance of the soul-severing banner to his next operation, Thowling explained the soul-severing banner in detail without hiding anything. The core formation within the soul-severing banner is called the soul-devouring formation. It's a peak-level godly formation that can forcibly extract the 3 immortal and 7 mortal souls of living beings, and slay the opponent's soul from a distance. At the same time, since the banner is refined from the corpses of soul-devouring beasts, it can devour souls that have left the physical body and convert them into the purest soul energy. Not only can it raise the Green Hill Fox's realm and strength, it can also aid the Green Hill Foxes in mind control. After hearing Thowling's detailed explanation of the soul-severing banner, Yu Haoran finally understood why the Green Hill Foxes were bent on reclaiming the soul-severing banner despite his shock. For that reason, even Su Wanru, a third tribulation demigod, had risked descending with his clone to reclaim the soul-severing banner. Thowling, is it possible to use the soul-severing banner to break the Green Hill Fox's mind control technique? Since the soul-severing banner was so important to the Green Hill Foxes, what Yuhauran wanted to know the most at the moment was whether the soul-severing banner's ability could be used to restrain the Green Hill Foxes. Yes. As he nodded in confirmation, Thowling further explained the reason for the restrain. To put it bluntly, the Green Hill Fox's method of mind control is a secret technique passed down in their bloodline that utilizes the spirit. Since it's a secret technique that utilizes the spirit, a shred of the target's soul energy would remain in the consciousness of the controlled being. Chapter 1729. Shuangniu Mountain, Right Ox City. Yuhauran looked at the shop of the Heavenly World Chamber of Commerce in Right Ox City. Not only was it still in operation, but it was also not affected by the internal strife of the Chamber of Commerce. At the same time, he could not help but admire Shen Jinwen, who was in charge of the business. After all, with the death of President Wu Xiqing, the departure of First Elder Bian Xingrui, and the death of more than 10 elders, the entire Heavenly World Chamber of Commerce was basically on the verge of bankruptcy and collapse. It could be said that it existed in name only. The branches in the central, eastern, and western regions had been forcefully annexed by the other two chambers of commerce. Even the branch in Guangling City in the southern region, as well as the shops in the various cities, had been secretly controlled by some powerful local families and the city lord's mansion, changing their owners. After recovering his emotions, Yuhauran turned his head and instructed Yusiki and Palace, "Sister, Brother Qi, let's first rest and reorganize in the Yiyuan Pavilion in the side courtyard of the shop before heading to the encampment of the Northern Expedition Army." Considering that among the forces secretly assisting and manipulating the Northern Expedition Army, other than the Green Hill Fox clan that was adept at bewitching people, there was also the Zhou clan that had a deep foundation, he was worried that he and Palace might lose sight of one and make mistake. At the same time, Yusiki, who had cultivated the mantra of Great Oblivion, not only did her combat strength not lose to Palace, but her oblivion state was also able to restrain the Green Hill Fox clan's bewitching secret technique. Therefore, when he left the prince's mansion, he had specially invited his sister to follow him. Yusiki and Palace were only interested in the battle. As for when and where to rest, they had no opinion. Therefore, after nodding in agreement to Yuhauran's suggestion, they followed him to the shop a few dozen meters away. "Greetings, Prince Consort." The waiter, who was busy greeting customers, immediately ran to greet Yuhauran when he saw him walk into the shop, his eyes filled with surprise. This waiter was Lin Hua, who had served him when he first came to the shop. Not bad. Seeing that Lin Hua's cultivation had already advanced to the martial king realm, Yuhauran nodded his head in praise and asked with a smile, "Lin Hua, where is shopkeeper Shen?" In response to the prince's son-in-law, shopkeeper Shen is currently entertaining a few esteemed guests in Tianyuan Pavilion and is unable to see you for the time being. When he heard Yuhauran ask about Shen Jinwen, the smile on Lin Hua's face quickly disappeared. He quietly observed the 5 customers in the hall with the corner of his eyes and replied with a smile again. However, Yuhauran could hear that when he mentioned the guests, his tone was slightly heavier. A thought flashed through Yuhauran's mind when he glanced at the 5 customers who were choosing their goods and discovered that they were all experts at the peak of the 9th grade martial saint realm. After that, he immediately mobilized Emperor Wu's divine telekinesis, which was at the peak of rank 5, and scanned the entire backyard of the shop. He immediately discovered the few distinguished guests that Lin Hua had mentioned earlier. It seems that the lesson of destroying the Heavenly Fragrance Pavilion's branch in Xianyang City was not enough. Now they actually want to continue to encroach on my territory in the southern domain. After seeing that there were people he knew among the guests, Yuhauran sneered to himself as he walked towards the backyard. He waved his hand and struck out with his palm, directly killing the 5 experts of the Heavenly Fragrance Pavilion who were disguised as guests in the hall. The strong energy fluctuations immediately alerted the Heavenly Fragrance Pavilion's martial saints and martial emperors, who were threatening Shen Jinwen in the Heavenly Yuan Pavilion in the backyard. They immediately stood up and rushed out of the courtyard. They looked at Yu Haoran, who was walking over with gloomy expressions. Either kneel down or die. Without stopping his footsteps towards Tianyuan Pavilion, Yu Haoran sneered and threatened. Faced with Yu Haoran's threat, a white-haired old man with the strongest cultivation asked with a gloomy expression, "Yu Haoran, we did not offend you this time. Why did you kill the 5 deacons of the Heavenly Fragrance Pavilion?" "When I got married, I asked His Majesty to issue an edict forbidding the Heavenly Fragrance Pavilion from all businesses in the southern domain. If anyone violates this edict, they will be destroyed, killed, and exterminated." Yu Haoran asked coldly as he stopped about 10 meters away from the old man. "Could it be that you have already forgotten about that imperial edict? Yu Haoran, this time we set foot in the right Ox city of the southern domain and bought this shop of the Heavenly World Chamber of Commerce at a high price. We have His Majesty's permission." After hearing Yu Haoran's reason for killing the Heavenly Fragrance Pavilion's expert, a smug smile appeared on the white-haired elder's face. At the same time, he took out a golden imperial edict from his storage ring. Then, he wrapped it in yuan li and delivered it to Yu Haoran. Yu Haoran took the edict from the old man and opened it slowly. A trace of astonishment flashed across his cold face. This was because not only did the edict allow the Heavenly Fragrance Pavilion to be involved in all businesses in the southern domain, but the contents of the edict were personally written by Emperor Qin. At the same time, and most importantly, the imperial seal and Emperor Qin's personal seal were stamped on the bottom left corner of the edict. This meant that as long as it was in the southern domain, as long as it was within the sphere of influence of Emperor Qin's empire, the Heavenly Fragrance Pavilion could do whatever business it wanted. No one was allowed to interfere. Emperor Qin clearly knew of the grievances between him and the Heavenly Fragrance Pavilion. He also knew that he was having Bian Xingrui prepare a business for the empire, and then use the southern domain as a foundation to develop a chamber of commerce that belonged to the empire. Under these circumstances, not only did he allow the Heavenly Fragrance Pavilion to meddle in the business of the southern domain again, but he also gave them such great authority. This made Yu Haoran faintly worried that his speculation had been wrong. The Green Hill Foxes very likely possessed secret techniques and methods that could control or influence Emperor Qin's mind. Originally, he had wanted to secretly investigate and gather sufficient evidence before secretly meeting with Emperor Qin to discuss how to deal with the Green Hill Foxes and the Zhou clan in one fell swoop. Now, it seemed that he needed to directly meet Emperor Qin and find out what had caused such a drastic change in him. He wasn't even worried about inciting his own anger and causing a rift between them. "Go back and tell your chairman that this shop in Right Ox City is the personal property of Yu Haoran. Even His Majesty has no right to take it back or interfere." Yu Haoran's expression returned to its cold indifference after he used his yuan power to shatter the edict in his hand. "So, either you get the hell out of Right Ox City now, or you die in Right Ox Mountain. Yu Haoran, are you thinking of rebelling?" Seeing that Yu Haoran had not only disobeyed Emperor Qin's orders, but also destroyed the edict that Emperor Qin had personally written himself, the white-haired old man from the Heavenly Fragrance Pavilion shouted angrily. Chapter 1730. Right Ox City, in the shop. "Let's go." The white-haired old man could feel the strong murderous aura from the other party. He knew that the audacious Yu Haoran was ready to kill. Thinking of how the other party dared to destroy the branch in Xianyang City without the protection of any power, the white-haired old man knew that the Heavenly Fragrance Pavilion would not let them go. Therefore, the white-haired old man immediately called out to the people behind him. He then took the lead and left the shop, leaving Right Ox City. In response, Yu Haoran stopped the palace who wanted to kill the other party. This was because he needed to inform the Qin Emperor through the experts in the Heavenly Fragrance Pavilion and inform the Qin Emperor about the power behind the northern expedition. Not only did he come personally, but he was also in a bad mood. Prince Consort, thank you for arriving in time. Otherwise, I would not have been able to hold on for long before succumbing to the other party's intimidation. After the experts of the Heavenly Fragrance Pavilion and Emperor Wu left, Shen Jinwen hurriedly walked to Yu Haoran and bowed respectfully. He then sighed with a bitter smile. Shopkeeper Shen, thank you for your hard work. Yu Haoran took out a few elixirs that could help increase one's cultivation and strength from the storage ring. He then stuffed the elixir bottle into Shen Jinwen's hand. Prince Consort, I am now your subordinate. It is my duty to protect your assets. There is no need to talk about hard work. Knowing Yu Haoran's character, Shen Jinwen obediently accepted the elixir bottle and quickly expressed his loyalty. Shopkeeper Shen, please hold on for a while longer. If the situation is out of my control, Yu Haoran, then you can take Lin Hua to the prince's mansion in Xianying City. I will arrange a new position for you and Lin Hua. When the Heavenly World Chamber of Commerce's headquarters was in chaos, Shen Jinwen immediately contacted him and took the initiative to ask him about the operations of Rydok City. Yu Haoran was very convinced and appreciated Shen Jinwen's loyalty and business ability. Therefore, before he knew what would happen after meeting Emperor Qin, all he could do was try his best to comfort him. Emperor's son-in-law, please be at ease. This subordinate will definitely protect the signboard of Heaven on Earth, and this shop in Rydok City before you give the order. Seeing that Yu Haoran had already considered his escape route in advance, Shen Jinwen secretly breathed a sigh of relief and hurriedly made his own promise. Nodding at Shen Jinwen, Yu Haoran turned his head and ordered Yusiki and Palace. Sister, Brother Qi, let's rest in Yiyuan Pavilion for an hour. After that, we will head straight to Pinggu City. Pinggu City was more than 7,000 kilometers away from Xuanniu Mountain. To the east was the tributary of the Huai River, to the south was the Huaiqing Mountain, and to the north and west was a boundless plain. It was a city with beautiful scenery and a prosperous economy. Pinggu City originally belonged to the Jin family, which had a history of more than 1,000,000 years. It was a third-class family with a peak 9th-grade martial venerable ancestor. However, it now belonged to the southern region's Emperor Qin's kingdom. The reason was that when the northern expedition of Emperor Qin's kingdom arrived at Pinggu City, the first elder of the Jin family, who had always been united and loving, joined forces with 4 other powerful elders to launch an internal strife. The internal strife caused the deaths of all the martial venerables and martial sages in the Jin family. In the end, the northern expedition of Emperor Qin's kingdom easily took over Pinggu City without paying any price. They also temporarily used Pinggu City as a temporary base for the expedition. Stop. Tell me your name. Just as Yu Haoran brought Yusiki and Palace to the outskirts of Pinggu City and walked to the city gate, a martial arts grandmaster realm soldier shouted at them. When Yu Haoran heard the soldier's shout, he could not help but frown. When he had married Qin Lingfei, the Emperor Qin had ordered people to draw numerous portraits of him and sent them to different cities and bases. Even if the soldier before him was a new recruit that had just joined the army, so long as he was a member of the Grand Qin Empire and had received the training of new recruits, it was impossible for him to not recognize his identity. Young man, are you deaf? Didn't you hear my order just now? When he saw Yu Haoran frowning and standing there in a daze, the soldier who had questioned him just now could not help but continue to shout at him sternly. At the same time, he gathered more than 10 soldiers with higher cultivations behind him. My name is Yu Haoran, the husband of Princess Ling Fei and the only prince consort of the Emperor Qin's kingdom. Although Yu Haoran was furious at the soldiers' targeting, he did not want to have any conflict with the Northern Expedition Army before he met the Emperor Qin. Therefore, He forcefully suppressed the anger in his heart and tried to introduce himself as calmly as possible. After hearing Yu Haoran's self-introduction, a hint of panic flashed across the eyes of the soldiers who were guarding the city. However, their panic was quickly replaced by calmness. At the same time, the soldier who had questioned him just now shook his head and said, "Yu Haoran, Prince Consort, I've never heard of you." Then, he pointed the spear in his hand at Yu Haoran and chased him away with a cold expression. Pingu City has now been designated as a restricted area for the garrison. No one is allowed to enter or leave. Therefore, you should immediately turn around and leave. Otherwise, we will not introduce you and hang your corpses on the city walls. With his current status and strength, Yu Haoran had already reached the limit of his tolerance. Now that the other party was so aggressive, it completely ignited the anger that had been accumulating in his heart for a long time. When you heard my introduction, a hint of panic flashed across your eyes. This prince consort knows that you already know my identity. Yu Haoran said with a faint smile as he walked towards the city gate with the corners of his mouth slightly raised. Since you know my identity, then you should be very clear about my personality and method. You should also know the consequences of offending me. Yu Haoran, what are you trying to do? Seeing Yu Haoran walking towards them, the soldier who was holding the spear asked with a trembling voice. I'll fulfill your wish just now and hang all your corpses on the city walls. Yu Haoran instantly put away the smile on his face, and appeared in front of the soldier in a flash. Before he reached out and broke the soldier's neck, he replied like the god of death. Then, in a short 3 seconds, the necks of all 15 martial grandmasters and martial kings were crushed. Then, he used the spears in their hands to hang all their corpses on the city walls. Chapter 1731. Outside Pingu City, not only had Yu Haoran killed 15 soldiers guarding the city, but he had also hung their corpses on the city walls. Such a blatant provocation immediately enraged the hundreds of elite soldiers in the turrets and archery towers. While ringing the alarm bell, they rushed towards Yu Haoran in the air. Die! However, just as the hundreds of elite martial kings and martial emperors were 20 meters away from Yu Haoran, a cold voice rang out and a red light flashed. The hundreds of elite soldiers were instantly killed. As the rain of blood fell on his body, Yu Haoran lifted his head to look at the few old men in embroidered robes who had rushed to the city walls. The anticipation in his eyes was gradually replaced by disappointment. This was because the few martial honors who had appeared on the city walls were the great ancestors of the first-rate clans in Xianyang City. Not only did they recognize and know him well, but they were also able to advance to martial honors because of the 3 pills that he had refined and the white bone soulfire that he had given them. In the past, when they had met him, they had been respectful and fawning over him. Now, when they saw him, not only were they no longer respectful, their fawning expressions had also been replaced by indifference. Senior Su, please invite His Majesty. A chill rose in Yu Haoran's heart, causing his fiery heart to gradually cool down. However, when he thought about the possibility that they had been controlled by the Green Hill Fox's bewitching secret technique, his heart was suddenly filled with endless anticipation. Therefore, after quickly adjusting his mentality, he requested in a gentler manner and tone. Yu Haoran, His Majesty will not see you. You should go back. The old man with the surname Su shook his head and replied. Senior Su, when I was married to Princess Ling Fei, His Majesty had personally issued a decree to allow me to see him anytime and anywhere. The old man's categorical rejection was not out of Yu Haoran's expectations. Therefore, he took the initiative to take a step back and requested. Therefore, I'll have to trouble you to ask your men to open the city gates immediately and allow me to see His Majesty personally. Yu Haoran, His Majesty has just issued an imperial edict to cancel all the promises he made to you. Old Man Su also expected that Yu Haoran would take advantage of the promise made by Emperor Qin when they were on good terms, so he wasn't surprised at all. As he replied, he took out a golden imperial edict from his sleeve. After what happened in Rydok City, Yuhaoran knew that the imperial edict must have come from Emperor Qin, so he didn't ask for it to be inspected. Since taking a step back and persuading them with kind words was useless against the manipulated elders, he could only change his mind. He planned to use his powerful strength to force his way into the city. However, the only thing that troubled him was how he should deal with the experts from the 4 great clans and the first-class clans of Xianyang City if they tried to stop him. If he killed all of them, how was he supposed to answer to the clans who had lost their loved ones after he dealt with the Green Hillfox clan and the Zhou clan? If he was merciful, with the number of experts gathered in the city, it would definitely exhaust too much of his strength and take up too much of his energy. It would be detrimental to his plan to eradicate the Green Hill Foxes and the Zhou clan. In desperation, he could only use special means to force Emperor Qin to leave the city and come to see him. Your son, Yuhaoran, requests an audience with father. Yuhaoran took 9 steps back and used the lion's roar secret technique to shout directly into the city. Emperor Wu's strength was at the peak of level 5. It was enough for the lion's roar secret technique to form a sound wave that spread over hundreds of kilometers, ensuring that every corner of Pingu City could hear his voice. However, after a full minute, there was still no response from the city. Your son, Yuhaoran, requests an audience with your majesty. With a slight frown, Yuhaoran continued to use the lion's roar secret technique to request an audience. However, he changed the tone and address of his request. After waiting for almost a minute, there was still no response from the city. This caused his face to gradually darken. Even if his mind was temporarily bewitched by the Green Hill Fox clan, with the cultivation and strength of a peak level 9 martial honorable, and the protection of the great Emperor Qin Kingdom's fate and the entire southern region's fate, it was impossible for Emperor Qin to completely lose his mind. Therefore, there were only 2 reasons why Emperor Qin was ignoring him. Either Emperor Qin was being secretly controlled, or the Emperor Qin in the city was no longer the original Emperor Qin. However, no matter what the situation was, he had to immediately help. Without any hesitation, Yuhaoran directly activated Emperor Wu's peak level 5 divine sense and scanned the entire Pingu City. Finally, in the mansion that originally belonged to the Jin family, he sensed Emperor Qin's aura and saw his current state. Judging from his aura, Emperor Qin was still the original Emperor Qin. Judging from his current situation, he was not being controlled at all. In other words, his earlier guess was completely wrong. Emperor Qin ignored his request for an audience out of his own will. It had nothing to do with the Green Hill Fox clan or the Zhou clan. How dare you, Yuhaoran, who allowed you to secretly spy on my every move? Just as Yuhaoran was about to use his divine sense to further investigate the reason for Emperor Qin's change, Emperor Qin, who was sitting on the dragon throne in the meeting hall, suddenly stared at a certain spot in the void of the hall and asked with a slightly gloomy expression. Yuhaoran was very surprised to see that the Qin Emperor was not only able to sense the prying of his spiritual force, but also able to pinpoint the exact location of his spiritual force. Even if Emperor Qin did not deliberately conceal the aura of his divine sense, which could easily alert the martial venerables in the hall, with his peak level 9 martial venerable cultivation, it was impossible for him to directly pinpoint the exact location of Emperor Wu's peak level 5 divine sense. Yuhaoran, withdraw your divine sense immediately. Just as Yuhaoran was feeling very surprised, Thaling's expression suddenly changed and reminded him in his sea of consciousness. After many years of cooperation, Yuhaoran did not hesitate to withdraw his divine sense that had locked onto the meeting hall the moment he heard Thaling's reminder. However, the moment his divine sense left the meeting hall, Emperor Qin's eyes suddenly shot out a black ray of light, which directly destroyed the void where his divine sense had just stopped. This is Recalling the terrifying power contained in the black ray of light just now, which was not at all inferior to the water arrow used by the Snake Beauty Realm expert, Yuhauran's heart suddenly surged with tempestuous shock. Yuhauran, return to the prince's mansion in Xianying City now, and then control the prince's mansion to Fengrun City in the eastern region. Just as Yuhauran was shocked by Emperor Qin's terrifying means just now, Thaling's expression in his sea of consciousness was very complicated as he ordered. Chapter 1732. Outside Pingu City. Why? The purpose of temporarily giving up the opportunity to conquer the eastern region was to rescue the controlled Emperor Qin from the Green Hill Fox clan and the Zhou clan. Now that it was time for a head-on confrontation, not only did Thaling request to leave Pingu City immediately, but he also wanted to leave the great Emperor Qin's kingdom and the southern region. This made Yuhauran rather puzzled. Yuhauran, Emperor Qin's change was due to his excessive ambition, which caused his mind to be completely bewitched. It has nothing to do with the Green Hill Fox clan and the Zhou clan. Thaling explained with a solemn expression as he looked at Emperor Qin in the meeting hall through the barrier of the consciousness space. What's the reason? With the decades of Emperor Qin's life as an emperor, he had great control over his emotions, be it his temperament, wisdom, ability, or vision. Although he had always had the ambition to rule the entire Tianxian continent and become the emperor of all time, he had never been affected by his ambition to do anything that would harm the great Emperor Qin's kingdom. Moreover, conquering the 5 regions and unifying the Tianxian continent could be said to be the dream and ambition of every emperor. Yuhauran found it hard to accept Thaling's explanation if it was only because of one's dream and ambition that caused one's mind to be completely bewitched. During the end of the Middle Ages, the demonic path's overlord, a peak expert of the demonic path, who had just entered the supremacy realm. Back then, the demonic path's emperor almost ruled the entire Middle Ages. Heart Demon Supreme Yuluo burned a trace of her soul. The supreme demonic heart demon, Yuluoran, was not only a supreme demonic emperor of the demonic path, but also a top genius of the demonic path. The limitless demonic art that he created was the only supreme mental cultivation method that could surpass the blood demon art of devouring. Because the limitless demonic art could not only devour the physical body and soul of a living being, but it could also integrate the other party's talent and comprehension. I think this is the real reason why Emperor Qin and Zishuan's cultivation could advance by leaps and bounds. Thaling retracted his gaze from Emperor Qin, explaining and reminding him with a solemn expression. Yuhauran, the reason why Emperor Qin doesn't want to see you is probably because he values and loves you from the bottom of his heart. If I'm not wrong, he should be afraid that he can't control his ambition, can't resist the fatal temptation you carry, and can't resist the order of Yuluo's remnant soul in the sea of consciousness. He used the limitless devil technique to forcefully devour you, and then with the help of your ancestral magus body, your perfect soul, and your top-notch monstrous talent and potential, he should directly attack the realm of Emperor Wu. Thaling's explanation and conjecture shocked Yuhauran. At the same time, a trace of warmth surged in his heart. The first thing he considered was how to completely free Emperor Qin from the control of the Demon Dao sovereign great Emperor Yu Luolan's remnant soul. There's no other way. In the face of Yuhauran's questioning, Thaling shook his head and explained. Yuhauran, according to my observation just now, Emperor Qin is not only willing to accept Yu Luolan's remnant soul into the sea of consciousness, but they should have also reached a certain agreement. So, even if I have a way to expel Yu Luolan's remnant soul, it's useless without the cooperation of Emperor Qin himself. After explaining to this point, Thaling used divine thought to scan the dozens of Empire's higher-ups in the conference hall again. He felt the residual aura of the devil technique in their bodies, and asked with a helpless tone. Yuhauran, you have also practiced the complete version of the Great Devouring Technique. So you should know the fatal temptation of this kind of devouring technique. In the face of the limitless devil technique, do you think these people have the perseverance and determination to get rid of the temptation? In the face of Thaling's rhetorical question, Yuhauran couldn't help but fall silent. In the second trial after returning to the sect, he had also used the complete version of the Great Devouring Technique to increase his cultivation and strength. Even if he had the willpower of 2 lifetimes, and his state of mind was not inferior to that of the martial sage realm, he had almost fallen into the joy of the Great Devouring Technique to increase his cultivation and strength. Then, the Empire's higher-ups, whose willpower and state of mind were far inferior to his, and who had already practiced the limitless devil technique for a period of time, probably couldn't get rid of this fatal temptation. However, when he thought of the 4 great guardian families, the 5 great hidden inheritance families, and the 7 top sects that listed the secret technique of devouring the flesh and blood of living creatures as a taboo, he couldn't help but worry for Emperor Qin. After all, 30,000 years ago, because the Ghost Sect, a giant of the Devil's Path, cultivated the incomplete Great Devouring Technique, the law enforcers of the 4 great guardian families not only slaughtered nearly 100,000 disciples of the Ghost Sect, but also uprooted the mountain where the Ghost Sect was located. Yuhauran, you don't have to worry too much. After hearing Yuhauran's worries, Thaling smiled and comforted him. First of all, the changes in the environment of heaven and earth, the slumber of the heavenly ways rules, and the emergence of the sealed 100 tribes, caused the guardian families and the hidden inheritance families to have no energy or mood to pay attention to Emperor Qin and the others who cultivated the limitless devil technique. Secondly, through my observations along the way, I found that Emperor Qin is a very cautious person. The number of people who cultivated the limitless devil technique in the entire Northern Expedition Army is less than 100. At the same time, in the name of conquering the Central Region, he could perfectly hide the secret of the limitless devil technique. Lastly, and most importantly, Luoran, who had experienced a crushing defeat in the Middle Ages, should have a very meticulous plan on how to safely protect Emperor Qin and the others from using the limitless devil technique to increase their cultivation and strength. After hearing Thaling's persuasion, Yuhauran finally breathed a sigh of relief. He raised his head and glanced at the old man surnamed Su and the others on the city wall. After waving his hand to put down the 15 corpses on the city wall, he cupped his hands in the direction of the Jin family mansion. After that, he called out to Yusiki and Palace. As he soared into the sky, he turned around and headed straight for the Twin Bull Mountain at the border of the 2 regions. After seeing that Yuhauran did not use his temper to force his way into Pingyang City, Emperor Qin, who was sitting on the dragon throne, could not help but breathe a sigh of relief. Your Majesty, do you know what kind of special physique and soul that kid has? Do you know what kind of heaven-defying transformation he will bring to you after devouring him? Just when Emperor Qin was secretly relieved, a flustered and exasperated question suddenly sounded in his mind. Demon Lord, Emperor Qin is warning you. You can touch anyone in this world except for Hauran. Otherwise, don't blame me for exploding my sea of consciousness and perishing together with you. After hearing the questioning voice in his mind, Emperor Qin immediately warned in a serious tone. Your Majesty, being indecisive is not the behavior of a wise ruler. In the face of Emperor Qin's warning, Luoran sneered sarcastically. Demon Lord, the final outcome of a heartless person is his own destruction. In the face of Luoran's sarcasm, Emperor Qin also coldly retorted. Chapter 1733. Pingyang City, Jin Family's Meeting Hall. Unable to respond to Emperor Qin's counterattack, Luoran couldn't help but ponder. Back then, he was only one step away from ruling the entire Middle Continent. Then, he was able to gather the destiny of the entire Middle Continent and become an existence like Xingtian Supreme. However, in the end, He was defeated by the betrayal of his family and subordinate. The reason was that he was heartless and unscrupulous in order to increase his cultivation and strength. This caused them to feel fear and worry. They were worried that he would make the decision to devour all the living beings in the Middle Continent for the sake of the illusory immortal realm. Thus, they chose to ally with their enemies and scheme. Demon Lord, now that our cultivation is at the peak of 9th grade martial honored realm, I already have the strength to attack Emperor Wu's realm. Shouldn't you follow our agreement and hand over the 9th level of the limitless demon art? Seeing that Yu Luoran couldn't refute his counterattack, Emperor Qin also secretly heaved a sigh of relief. What kind of person was Yu Luoran? What kind of heaven-defying strength did he possess? In this short half a month, it could be said that he was the one who had experienced it the most. Although Yu Haoran was very strong and had many trump cards, in front of Yu Luoran, the demon lord of the Middle Ages, all of his strength and trump cards were as fragile as bubbles. This was also the reason why he would rather let Yu Haoran misunderstand him and hate him. He didn't hesitate to take the risk of completely breaking off their relationship than to meet Yu Haoran. Emperor Qin's sudden request for the 9th level of the limitless demon art interrupted Yu Luoran's contemplation. At the same time, it also made him temporarily put down the idea of devouring Yu Haoran. He raised his finger and pointed at the divine soul in his consciousness space. A trace of energy with a black light entered the divine soul. Old Marshal Meng, go and pick 3 captives of Emperor Wu's realm for us. After receiving the 9th level of the limitless demon art from Yu Luoran, Emperor Qin carefully comprehended it for a while. Then, he ordered Meng Zhenkai, who was at the lower end of the hall. Understood. After Meng Zhenkai got up and accepted the order, he immediately turned and left the hall. However, his eyes revealed a trace of worry. After returning to Right Ox City by tearing through the void, Yu Haoran took away all the goods in the store and had Thaling and his clone work together to set up a ceiling formation. He then left the store with Xin Jinwen and Lin Hua, returning to the prince's mansion in Xianying City. After instructing the sword without trace to arrange Xin Jinwen and Lin Hua's accommodations, Yu Haoran walked to his own courtyard with a conflicted expression on his face. Activating the tactical formation of the prince's mansion to leave Xianying City, leave the Emperor Qin's kingdom, and finally go to Fengrun City in the eastern region, he had to ask for Qin Lingfei's consent in advance for such an important decision. But how could he ask her? What kind of reason did he use to make her agree? It was precisely because of the helplessness in his heart that he was unable to reach out and push open the courtyard door. He could only stand there hesitantly. Prince Consort, you're back. Qin Lingfei, who had just finished her cultivation, habitually used her spiritual sense to check the situation in the mansion. She was surprised to see Yu Haoran standing at the courtyard door and immediately rushed out in surprise. Looking at Qin Lingfei's innocent smile, Yu Haoran's heart was filled with tenderness. He couldn't help but sigh softly. At the same time, he had to use the method of lying to keep her in a carefree state. Ling Fei, there's something I need to discuss with you. Holding Qin Lingfei's lily-white hand, Yu Haoran solemnly reminded her as he led her to the pavilion in the courtyard. Prince Consort, did something happen to Imperial Father? Yu Haoran had suddenly returned to the southern region from the war in the eastern region and immediately rushed to the battlefield in the central region. This made Qin Lingfei realize that Imperial Father might have met with trouble. Therefore, when she saw Yu Haoran's solemn reminder, she immediately asked nervously. Yu Haoran stretched out his hand and scratched Qin Lingfei's nose. He tried his best to maintain a relaxed tone as he criticized, "Silly girl, how could Imperial Father, who has millions of elite soldiers protecting him, be in trouble? That's good." Hearing that Imperial Father was not in trouble, Qin Lingfei immediately heaved a sigh of relief. At the same time, she couldn't help but roll her eyes at Yu Haoran. After gesturing for Qin Lingfei to sit upright on the stone chair, Yu Haoran stretched out his finger and pressed it on her forehead. Then, he transmitted the image of the deep pit that he saw in the Hengduan Mountains, as well as the image of the ancient god-fiend's seal formation to her. Prince Consort, what is that deep pit? What are those two seal formations? Qin Lingfei could clearly sense the billowing murderous aura contained in the deep pit and the seal formation through the images condensed by divine telekinesis. She couldn't help but ask in trepidation. Those are the seal formations used to seal the ancient godfiend and godfiend clans. As for the deep pit, it's used to seal the hundreds of millions of monster experts from the ancient times. Yu Haoran tried his best to make his tone sound more solemn as he explained. At the same time, his face and eyes revealed a worried expression. Ling Fei, when I was resealing the ancient godfiend and godfiend clans, I was deceived by the powerhouses of the four guardian clans. As a result, the seal formation was not perfect. At the same time, the formation used to seal the ancient godfiend clans was also destroyed by the nine-tailed green fox of the Green Hill Fox clan. As a result, the sealing effect of the formation is gradually weakening. Prince Consort, do you want to control the prince's mansion and leave Xianyang City? In order to better control the prince's mansion's formation, Qin Lingfei had chosen formations as her supporting path of cultivation. Although her current attainment in formations wasn't very high, with the various formations manuals left behind by Thaling and her second clone, her knowledge of formations theory was rather rich. She knew what an incomplete and damaged seal formation meant to the ancient godfiend, and godfiend clans that were sealed. She also knew what it meant to Xianyang City, which was situated between the three ancient clans, when the seal formation lost its effectiveness. That's right. Yu Haoran began his lie as he nodded to confirm Qin Lingfei's conjecture. In 5 months to a year, the ancient godfiend, and godfiend clans will be fully reborn. When that time comes, the entire Xianyang City will probably be destroyed by the three powerful clans. Perhaps even the entire southern region will be under their rule. That's why I've led 100,000 elite soldiers to conquer the eastern region, while His Majesty has personally led 10 million elite soldiers to conquer the central region. All of this is to provide temporary shelter for the hundreds of millions of citizens of Emperor Qin's kingdom. Chapter 1734. Xianyang City, in the Prince's Mansion. No, our destination is the Eastern Domain, Fengrun City, which I have just captured some time ago. After shaking his head to deny Qin Lingfei's speculation, Yu Haoran continued his plan of lying. According to my discussion with my father, the Central Domain, which is rich in spiritual qi of heaven and earth and has many strong cultivators, is likely to be the next target of the ancient demon race and god race. Therefore, continuing to occupy and expand the territory of the Eastern Domain is also a precautionary measure. Qin Lingfei, who didn't hear the flaw in Yu Haoran's lie, nodded and accepted the reason he just gave, and couldn't help but ask about the time of departure from Xianyang City. Midnight today. Not wanting to attract too much attention and suspicion because of the departure of the prince's mansion, Yu Haoran decided to leave quietly in the dead of night. After nodding to indicate that she knew the exact time of departure, Qin Lingfei got up and planned to go to the Palace of Compassionate and Peaceful in the Imperial Palace to resign from the Empress Dowager Zixuan. Ling Fei, let me go with you. Zixuan's cultivation and strength had advanced by leaps and bounds, and it was very likely that Emperor Qin had taught her the limitless demon art. Considering Zixuan's state of mind and perseverance, Yu Haoran was worried that when she faced Qin Lingfei, whose talent and potential had reached the monstrous level, and whose cultivation and strength were similar to hers, she would be unable to control the inner demon formed by the limitless demon art, and eventually do something that would hurt Qin Lingfei. Therefore, he got up at the same time and suggested with a smile, "Okay. Yu Haoran was willing to accompany her to resign from the Empress Dowager, which was enough to prove his love for her, and it was enough to show that he was willing to take the initiative to further ease the relationship with the imperial family. This made Qin Lingfei very, very happy. At midnight, in the void 10,000 meters above Xianyang City, Yu Haoran came alone to the square where the array hub was located. The ink-black night did not affect his vision at all. Yu Haoran looked down at Xianyang City, which he had lived in for more than 2 years, and recalled every detail of his time in Xianyang City. Then, he let out a sigh of reluctance. Alas! He knew very well that Xianyang City, which had lost the protection of himself and Emperor Qin, had no hope of surviving the ancient war between the demon race and the god race. After letting out a soft sigh, Yu Haoran shook his head and dispelled the distracting thoughts in his mind. While sitting cross-legged in front of the white tiger statue, he called out to his second clone that was cultivating in the victor. "Brother Ran, I'll be troubling you from now on. Brother Yu, don't worry. I'm here for you. You can just focus on your cultivation." After controlling the core of the mansion's formation with his divine sense, the second clone commanded the prince's mansion to stealthily leave Xianyang City. "Okay." Nodding his head in response to the second clone's instructions, Yu Haoran took out dozens of Wu Zun and Emperor Wu level black and white wings. He planned to take advantage of the time when the mansion was heading to the eastern domain to raise his mental state, physical state, spiritual energy, and soul power to the early stage of Emperor Wu level 7. Only when all 4 indicators reached the early stage of Emperor Wu level 7 would he have the confidence to rely on the assistance of the Celestial Ending Sword and Celestial Trapping Sword to defeat and behead the real Emperor Wu level 7 expert. Only then would he be able to truly let loose and continue to expand his territory. While the second clone stealthily left Xianyang City under the control of the prince's mansion, in the courtyard of the Palace of Compassionate and Peaceful in the Imperial City, Zi Xian, who was wearing a purple dress, had a complicated expression in her eyes. "Empress Dowager, after I lead the army to conquer the Bai clan's 9 Dragon City, I will use 9 Dragon City as the temporary imperial capital." As Zi Xian watched the prince's mansion stealthily leave Xianyang City with a complicated expression, a faint silhouette slowly condensed beside her, and then gently reminded her. "Therefore, during this period of time, apart from making the best use of your time to raise your cultivation and strength, you must also prepare to leave Xianyang City at any time. Your Majesty, are you really going to give up on Xianyang City?" Turning her head to look at the faint silhouette, Zi Xian's complicated expression was replaced by reluctance, and her tone was somewhat unwilling as she asked. After all, she had lived in Xianyang City for nearly 4/5 of her life. She already had very deep feelings for every brick, every tile, every blade of grass, and every tree in the city. "Empress Dowager, actually, I am also unwilling to give up on the country that my ancestors fought for. However, according to the information provided by the prince consort, the birth of the ancient demon god clan and the Yao clan is both unstoppable and unstoppable. At the same time, according to the demon lord's investigation and speculation using a secret technique, the 3 ancient clans all have supreme existences of the supremacy level." Facing Zi Xian's reluctance to leave Xianyang City, Emperor Qin's silhouette also somewhat reluctantly persuaded her. "Therefore, in order to protect the bloodline of the Qin clan, and also in order to recover the lost land in the future, I have no choice but to temporarily give up on Xianyang City, and give up the entire southern region." Sigh. After hearing Emperor Qin's persuasion, Zi Xian lightly sighed, and nodded in agreement to leave Xianyang City. 5 days. Even with the second clone of the formation Emperor personally controlling the mansion's formation hub, it still took a total of 5 days and 5 nights to travel from Xianyang City to Fengrun City in the eastern region. Although the time spent on the journey was very long, Yu Haoran's harvest was equally astonishing. The 66 martial venerables and Emperor Wu's black and white wings allowed his state of mind, physical grade, origin power, and soul power to reach the peak of Emperor Wu's 7th rank. Moreover, he didn't feel the slightest hint of a limit to his strength increase. This meant that he could still rely on the black and white wings of the ancient god and devil clans to continue increasing his realm and strength. At the same time, with the help of the 5 4-colored and 2 5-colored void fruits, as well as the space crystal that contained pure spatial energy, he successfully comprehended the law of the West and the law of nothingness. This also allowed him to smoothly master 8 types of auxiliary law powers, and he was only 4 types away from comprehending and cultivating the law of space. After being reminded by his second clone, Yuhauran slowly exhaled the turbid air that had accumulated in his chest, and then slowly opened his eyes. Then, he directly used his divine thought to inform Qin Lingfei, the sword without trace, and the others to gather at the square. At the same time, Thaling and his second clone also quietly left the knowledge sea space, and then used the formation flags that Thaling had just refined, and completely merged the Prince's Mansion's formation with Fengrun City's formation. This could not only strengthen the Prince's Mansion's defense, but also increase the power of Fengrun City's attack formation. After Qin Lingfei, the sword without trace, Yusiki, Xiang Muling, and Palace arrived at the square, Yuhauran opened a gap in the mansion's defense formation, and led everyone to the courtyard of the mansion. "Master, I want to go." Chapter 1735. Fengrun City, City Lord's Mansion. Go. But be careful. It had only been 3 days since they left Fengrun City. How could Yuhauran forget about Xiang Muling's hobbies? Therefore, although she didn't say her request out loud, Yuhauran had already guessed it. His eyes were filled with doting love. "I understand, Master." After receiving Yuhauran's approval, Xiang Muling immediately smiled and nodded. She turned around and rushed out of the courtyard while waving at Qin Lingfei and the sword without trace. "First Master's wife, second Master's wife, Ling will be busy first." "This little girl is still so careless." Qin Lingfei shook her head and smiled as she watched Xiang Muling rush out of the courtyard like a child. After looking away from Xiang Muling, Yuhauran reminded Qin Lingfei and the others, "Lingfei, Wuhan, sister, according to your moods and habits, if you're willing to stay in the City Lord's mansion, you can choose a courtyard that you like. If you're not willing to stay, then you can stay in the Prince's mansion." After hearing Yuhauran's reminder, Yusiki immediately flew back to the Prince's mansion. Palace thought for a moment before speaking. "Brother Yu, I have at most a month before I have to lift the suppression of my breakthrough and make the final breakthrough. Thus, I plan to use the Xian Wang Qi in the mansion to increase my accumulation and try to break through to the peak of the 9th stage of the Martial Emperor realm." Hearing that Palace planned to break through to the next realm in a short period of time, Yuhauran was pleasantly surprised. "Brother Qi, in the next month, other than secretly guarding the left army, I will be staying in the City Lord's mansion most of the time. I don't need your help for the time being, so you can cultivate in peace." According to the appearance of Yu Luolan's remnant soul in the Middle Ages, Thaling sensed that something was wrong. With the help of the 6 chaos imprints in his main body, Victor, he re-examined the tomb of the great god Jinyuan in the Middle Ages. He discovered that the tomb's formation, which originally needed another 4 months to activate, was suddenly showing signs of loosening. Furthermore, according to the rate of loosening, it would take at most 1 to 2 months for the tomb to be exposed to the world. At the same time, due to the premature activation of the tomb's defense formation, the moment the tomb was fully activated, it would cause a tremor that would shake the entire Tianxian continent. At that time, except for the godly state experts who were restricted by the heavens' consciousness, most of the demigod realm fake gods would definitely swarm in. Even innate treasures like the void mirror might appear. If Pallas could successfully advance to the peak of Emperor Wu's 9th level before he officially opened an account in the tomb of the great god Jin Yuan, then with the terrifying sword Qi contained in the immortal sword, he would at least have the strength of a first tribulation demigod or an early second tribulation demigod. At the same time, he was eager to return to Fengrun City in the eastern region and decided not to leave the city lord's mansion for a while. He also hoped to use this time to raise his strength to the peak of Emperor Wu's 9th level or the first tribulation demigod realm. This was because only in this way could he compete with countless demigod realm experts for the treasures left behind by the great god Jin Yuan and help Faling take back the chaos imprint that belonged to the Bell of Chaos from the weapon spirit of the Void Mirror. Got it. After nodding to indicate that he understood, Pallas also soared into the sky and went straight to the prince's mansion. Ling Fei Wu Hen, you two go ahead and choose the rooms you like. I'll discuss the military affairs of Fengrun City with General Lan and the others. After retracting his gaze from Pallas, Yu Haoran instructed Qin Lingfei and the sword without trace. He walked toward the meeting hall of the city lord's mansion. At the same time, he used his divine thought to inform Lan Rong and the others who were cultivating in seclusion. Qinghu Mountain Range, above Qinghu Lake. Looking at the scarlet loath that was sitting cross-legged in the air, Yu Haoran's expression was slightly nervous. Originally, it was estimated that he would need about a month to strengthen his accumulation so that he could directly break through the peak of Emperor Wu's 9th level. However, only 20 days had passed and Pallas could no longer suppress the boiling power in his body to the extent that he had no choice but to break through to the next realm. Would the lack of 10 days of accumulation affect his final realm? This was the reason why Yu Haoran was nervous and worried. After all, the peak of Emperor Wu's 9th level and the peak of Emperor Wu's 9th level were two completely different realms. The levels that the two represented were different, and the difference in strength between them was also like the difference between heaven and earth. Brother Yu, I'm going to start. Pallas, who felt that his body was almost ready, suddenly opened his eyes and reminded Yu Haoran. Brother Qi, you can break through to the next realm with all your might. Leave the rest to me. Yu Haoran put away the nervous look in his eyes and directly took out the celestial trapping sword. He pretended to be relaxed and assured Pallas. Nodding his head, Pallas directly removed the seal on the power in his body and allowed the boiling demon power and soul power to break through the bottleneck of the realm that had already been loosened. Boom! Just as Pallas removed the seal on his body, a dull sound of thunder rang out from his body. Accompanied by the dull sound of thunder, an aura that terrified countless beasts in the mountain range rapidly rose from his body. After 10 seconds, the aura suddenly increased by a fraction. After 30 seconds, the aura increased by another fraction. After a minute, the aura increased by yet another fraction. Boom! Accompanied by the second dull sound of thunder from Pallas's body, the terrifying aura suddenly increased by more than 10 times. All the beasts around Lake Qing that were below the peak of the 3rd level of the martial emperor realm either crawled on the ground in submission or turned to flee to the outskirts of the mountain range. Boom! 10 minutes later, when the third, even more violent, muffled thunder rang out from the scarlet loth's body, not only did all the exotic beasts in the entire Qinghu mountain range flee in panic, even Yu Haoran couldn't help but feel nervous. Faling, with your experience, can Pallas reach the limit of the peak of the 9th level of the Emperor Wu in the end? Logically speaking, there shouldn't be any problems with the Scarlet Loth's current level of accumulation. However, the breakthrough of the martial Emperor realm is not only related to one's talent, potential, comprehension, and profound accumulation, but also one's luck. After hearing Yu Haoran's question, Faling first briefly explained the factors that affected Emperor Wu's breakthrough before shaking his head and replying. Chapter 1736. In the Qinghu Mountain Range. Even the experienced Thaling was unable to determine whether Pallas could successfully advance to the limit of Emperor Wu's peak level 9. This made Yuhaoran even more nervous and worried. At the same time, he focused all his attention on Pallas. However, at this moment, about 20 kilometers away from Qing Hu, a middle-aged man in a brocade robe and a white-haired old man in a gray robe appeared in the void that was torn apart. Master, the exotic beast in the depths of the mountain range that is advancing to the peak level 9 of Emperor Wu's peak level 9 is not only gifted, but also has an outstanding bloodline. Do you think I should capture it alive? The old man in the gray robe and white robe carefully sensed the aura of a breakthrough coming from the depths of the mountain range. Then, he suggested to the middle-aged man in the brocade robe excitedly, "Go. Be careful." Although he did not use his divine thought to check carefully, the middle-aged man in the brocade robe knew how outstanding the exotic beast's talent and bloodline were based on the reactions of the exotic beasts that were fleeing for their lives and the powerful aura that exceeded their own level. Therefore, he nodded in agreement to the old man in the gray robe's suggestion without any hesitation. "Master, please wait for a moment. I'll be right back." After getting the approval of the middle-aged man in the brocade robe, the old man in the gray robe licked his lips excitedly. Then, the old man in the gray robe soared into the sky and turned into a bolt of lightning, heading straight for Qing Hu. "Yuhaoran, this is bad. A false god expert who has just advanced to the demigod realm is speeding up and rushing toward us." Although his attention was on Pallas like Yuhaoran, Thaling, who was once a peak supreme being, still maintained a high level of vigilance when it came to sensing danger. The moment the old man in the gray robe soared into the sky, Thaling sensed the approaching danger and immediately used his divine thought of the peak level 3 demigod realm to check. Then, his expression changed abruptly as he reminded Yuhaoran. Thaling, use the possession technique immediately. The moment he received Thaling's reminder, Yuhaoran, who also sensed a powerful force speeding up, soared into the sky and ordered Thaling in his sea of consciousness. "Stop!" Yuhaoran soared into the sky and flew about 1,000 meters forward while holding the celestial trapping sword's hilt. "My brother is breaking through in the peak level 9 of the mountain range. If you don't want to die, you'd better get out of my way right now." The gray-robed elder's eyes flashed with a hint of disdain as he used his divine sense to scan the blue-robed youth blocking his way and discovered that he was only a peak 9th grade martial honorable. Heaven slaying heaven. Seeing that his opponent did not slow down at all, Yuhaoran's face darkened and he took a deep breath. Then, he overdrew a part of his ancestral which bloodline and mobilized all his yuan qi and soul power. Together with the celestial trapping sword and the power of the law of flash, he used the most powerful move of the heaven and earth massacre sword technique. "This is bad." The old man in the gray robe, who was charging with all his might, sensed that the sword technique used by the young man in the blue robe was infinitely close to the First Tribulation demigod realm. Although he was also a First Tribulation demigod realm cultivator, he had not fully grasped the power of the demigod realm. At the same time, capturing the demigod beast that had just reached the peak level 9 of the Great Emperor realm was not worth using his full strength. Therefore, in the face of the sword qi that crossed time and space, the old man in the gray robe did not have the time to use his full strength. He could only use his divine thought to activate the lower Emperor realm defensive artifact. Boom! Ah! Puff! Accompanied by a violent roar, the old man in the gray robe screamed and spat out blood. His body was like a kite with a broken string as he crashed heavily onto the hard ground. Yuhaoran, who also found it hard to believe, was able to severely injure a semi-divinity realm expert with a single move. Fortunately, with his rich combat experience, he quickly recovered from his daze. The power of the law of speed allowed him to appear in front of the old man in the gray robe in a flash and slash at his head with the celestial trapping sword. When the celestial trapping sword was less than a meter away from the old man in the gray robe, Thowling shouted at the top of his lungs, "You Howren, back off now!" Without any hesitation, the power of the law of the East forced him to retreat 100 meters away. At the same time, a sharp sword with a terrifying aura appeared where he had been standing. According to the position of the sharp sword, the target of the sneak attack was the sea of consciousness space between his eyebrows. According to the terrifying aura of the sharp sword, it meant that the sharp sword had reached the divine realm. If it pierced his eyebrows, his divine soul would definitely be severely injured. Therefore, Yuhauren's face turned gloomy when he saw the sword floating in the air. "Boy, you're so young, but you're so ruthless." A middle-aged man in a brocade robe appeared beside the sword as he suppressed his anger. "Yuhauren, I'll control the body from now on because this person is at the peak of the second tribulation demigod realm." Just when the middle-aged man in brocade robe appeared beside the sword, Thowling, who had successfully performed the possession technique, reminded him with a sudden change in expression. "Okay." While agreeing to Thowling's suggestion, Yuhauren looked coldly at the middle-aged man in brocade robe and retorted, "The strange beast that is breaking through in the depths of Qinghu mountain range is my good brother. At the same time, I've already warned him, but this old dog didn't listen. Therefore, it's not that I'm ruthless, but this old dog doesn't know what's good for him. Boy, you're courting death." Yuhauren's blatant humiliation completely infuriated the old man in gray robe, who had used elixirs to stabilize his injuries. He instantly took out his natal sword of Upper Emperor Realm and slashed at Yuhauren as he shouted angrily, "Die!" Thowling quickly took control of the body and activated the origin energy of the immortal trapping sword. Together with the sword technique, he enveloped the old man in gray robe and the middle-aged man in brocade robe. "Elder Yun, be careful." When the middle-aged man in brocade clothes saw the blue-clothed young man, who was originally full of vigor, instantly replaced by the vicissitudes of life, a strong sense of fatal danger surged in his heart. He immediately used the deity realm sword in his hand to display his strongest sword technique while reminding the gray-robed old man loudly. Chapter 1737. In the Qinghu Mountain Range. The moment the gray-robed elder's Upper Emperor natal sword came into contact with the terrifying sword Qi, it was shattered into pieces by the immense power contained in the sword Qi. Immediately after, the terrifying sword Qi did not weaken in the slightest. After forcibly destroying the damaged lower Emperor natal sword, the gray-robed elder was shredded into minced meat. Damn it! He saw that his own sword technique could not withstand a single blow from the terrifying sword Qi. He saw that the gray-robed elder was shredded into minced meat by the terrifying sword Qi. The middle-aged man cursed under his breath. He quickly took out a green jade pendant and crushed it. The crushed green jade pendant instantly exploded with a dense green energy. The green energy quickly formed a green energy light shield, which directly covered the middle-aged man in the brocade robe. At this moment, the terrifying sword Qi slashed heavily on the green energy shield. Boom! With a violent roar, the terrifying sword Qi began to tear the green energy shield apart bit by bit like a cutting machine. Damn it, Yuhauren, the jade pendant he used just now was a divine power shield left behind by an expert who had just entered the godly state. Thowling reminded Yuhauren with a darkened face when he saw that the green energy shield was constantly depleting the terrifying sword Qi. Damn it! The middle-aged man in embroidered robes cursed with a gloomy expression when he saw the azure light barrier in a precarious situation. This was because the jade pendant that contained divine power was his strongest life-saving means. If the green energy shield was broken by the terrifying sword Qi, he would either have to use a top-notch escape talisman to escape or die at the hands of the young man in blue. However, as the clan leader of a hidden family and the true ruler of the Tianxian continent, he could not accept either outcome. Therefore, the middle-aged man in embroidered clothes threatened Yuharan with a gloomy expression before the green light barrier was broken. "Boy, do you know who I am?" If the target of the middle-aged man's threat was Yuharan, he might have asked him back with interest. Then, he might have considered whether he should show mercy due to his fear of the other party's background. However, the one who was controlling the body was the Thaling, a primordial treasure that had existed since the beginning of the world. He was one of the most powerful peak-level supremes in the world, a supreme existence that could rarely be threatened. Therefore, Thaling did not pay any attention to the middle-aged man's threat. Instead, due to his displeasure, he further stimulated the origin energy of the immortal trapping sword and increased the power of the sword chi attack. "Kid, my surname is Lan, and I am the patriarch of the Lan family, one of the 5 great hidden families in the profound sky continent." When the middle-aged man saw that the blue-clothed young man not only ignored his threat, but also continued to increase the power of the terrifying sword chi attack, the middle-aged man's expression changed abruptly. He quickly revealed his identity and continued to threaten. "If you dare to harm me, the hundreds of demigod experts and dozens of martial gods of the Lan family will exterminate your entire clan." In the space of the sea of consciousness, when he heard that the middle-aged man was the patriarch of the Lan family, one of the 5 great hidden families, Yuharan's expression instantly turned ugly. When Zhongli Shueqin was living in the prince's mansion, she had introduced the origins of the 5 great hidden families to him in detail. The 5 great hidden families in the profound sky continent were the Yingtai family that had inherited the bloodline of Yingtai Wuju from the Middle Ages, the Shangguan family that had inherited the bloodline of Shangguan Patian from the Middle Ages, the Kong family that had inherited the bloodline of Saint Kong Qiu from the Middle Ages, the Lan family that had inherited the bloodline of Supremes from the Middle Ages, and the Zhongli family that had inherited the bloodline of Supremes from the Middle Ages. Among the 5 great hidden families, the Zhongli family had the longest history, the Yingtai family had the strongest bloodline, the Shangguan family was the most domineering, the Kong family was the most humble, and the Lan family was the most powerful. At the same time, according to Zhongli Shueqin's warning, the Lan family was the most untouchable among the 5 great hidden families. Because of the special bloodline of the Lan family, it was difficult for them to give birth to the next generation. Therefore, the population of the Lan family was very small, which made the Lan family very united. Basically, if something happened to a member of the Lan family, the whole family would take revenge immediately. Besides, their revenge was different from that of the Qian family. They would take revenge without any reason, without considering any consequences. Not to mention that the middle-aged man in front of him was the patriarch of the Lan family. If he killed him, not only would he be hunted down by the demigods and martial gods of the Lan family, but the Emperor Qin Kingdom and the 100 Qi Gate would also be implicated. Thinking of Zhongli Shueqin's introduction of the hidden families, Yuharan knew that he couldn't afford to offend the Lan family for the time being. Helplessly, he could only persuade Thaling, who was increasing the power of his sword chi, to spare the man's life for now. After hearing Yuharan's introduction of the middle-aged man in front of him, Thaling, who had a better understanding of the inherited families of the Middle Ages, had a cold and gloomy light flash across his eyes. Next, he didn't listen to Yuharan's warning and order. Instead, he directly activated the 6 marks of chaos in Victor's body, and used the marks of chaos to increase the power of his spiritual body, which in turn increased the power of his sword chi. In an instant, the power of the sword chi increased by tens of times, and reached the peak of 3rd-level martial god, which was far beyond the limit of the cyan light shield. Puff! Along with a clear cracking sound, the cyan light shield was broken in an instant. Then, in front of the middle-aged man's eyes, the terrifying sword chi, which was at the peak of 3rd-level martial god, directly shredded him into a puddle of blood. "Thaling, what are you doing?" Because Thaling's action of killing the head of the Lon family was too unexpected, and the process was too fast, Yuhauran only reacted the moment the head of the Lon family was completely killed. Thinking of the consequences of killing the head of the Lon family, and thinking of the Emperor Qin's kingdom and the 100 Qi gate that might be implicated, Yuhauran, who was instantly filled with endless anger, couldn't help but ask sternly. Yuhauran, don't be angry. After I erase all the traces of killing the head of the Lon family, I'll explain to you in detail why I killed him. Faced with Yuhauran's stern question, Thaling didn't care at all. As he reminded him, he used a secret technique to clean up the aura left behind by the attack. Chapter 1738. In the Qinghu Mountain Range. Looking at Pallas, who had successfully advanced to the peak of the 9th level of the Great Emperor Realm and was trying his best to break through to the peak of the 9th level of the Emperor Wu, Thaling voluntarily handed over control of his body and explained in detail why he had tried his best to kill the leader of the Lon family. Among the 5 great hidden families, the most reasonable were the Zhongli family and the Kong family. The most unreasonable were the Shangguan family and the Lon family. If you offended the people of the Shangguan clan and Lon clan, especially the arrogant direct descendants, you would either immediately kneel down and beg for their forgiveness, or you would directly destroy the corpses and destroy the evidence. You must not show the slightest bit of a woman's opinion. Otherwise, with the tyrannical and cruel nature of the 2 inherited families, it would be too late to regret the bloody revenge afterwards. After hearing Thaling's detailed explanation, Yuhauran, who had regained control of his body, could not help but fall into silence. As the saying goes, a man has no intention of hurting a tiger, but a tiger wants to hurt a man. Because he was afraid of the other party's identity as the leader of an inherited family, he was willing to take the initiative to let the other party go in order to avoid implicating his family and friends. However, the other party was the leader of a hidden family. Whether it was for the dignity of the family or his own face, he would definitely eliminate all hidden dangers that could lead to the disappearance of the humiliation and the exposure of the secret. When the time came, the opponent who would appear to kill him would not be just a demigod expert of the 1st or 2nd tribulation realm. After taking a deep breath and forcefully dispelling the depression in his heart, Yuhauran could not help but begin to worry and think about how to deal with the revenge of the Lon family. Yuhauran, just now I used a secret technique unique to the ancient god tribe to clean up all traces of killing the leader of the Lon family. Even if the Lon family's god-level expert were to personally make a move, he would not be able to find any clues about us. After hearing Yuhauran's worries, Thaling smiled and comforted him. Thaling, what if a god-level expert were to make a move? Yuhauran did not feel at ease because of Thaling's comforting words. His tone was still serious as he continued to ask. If a god-level expert were to make a move, he would at most be able to deduce the extent of the secret technique I used and use the secret technique to clean up the traces to suspect the ancient god expert. This would be more beneficial to you. Facing Yuhauran's questioning, Thaling's expression was even more relaxed as he explained. Seeing that Thaling had considered all the hidden dangers after killing the leader of the Lon family, Yuhauran finally let out a sigh of relief. Then, he raised his head and looked at the red loath that had risen above the green lake. His eyes immediately revealed a nervous and expectant look. Break! Sensing that the accumulation in its body was rapidly draining away, the scarlet loath knew that it still lacked a little bit of maturity to break through the limits of its realm. Fortunately, before the breakthrough, Yuhauran had already refined several kinds of top-notch pills for him that could stimulate his potential and help him increase his cultivation. Therefore, after taking out 3 sparkling pills the size of longans from the independent space and swallowing them all in one go, Pallas roared at the sky. Then, with the help of the pills and his remaining cultivation realm, he began to break through the limit of Emperor Wu's level 9 peak. Boom! Following an even more intense sound of thunder, a terrifying aura suddenly increased by dozens of times. It directly shattered a large part of the void above the green lake and caused countless void turbulence energy to flow down like a waterfall. Facing the surging void turbulence energy, Pallas did not panic at all. He waved his hand. Then, a seemingly ordinary palm energy slapped all the energy of the void turbulence back into the void crack, and at the same time, it also smoothed out the void crack that had been torn apart. After that, Pallas quickly withdrew his terrifying aura and appeared beside Yuhauran in a flash. "Brother Yu, thank you. It was all thanks to Yuhauran's wholehearted protection that he was able to break through the realm without any distractions. It was all thanks to the 3 types of pills that he was able to reach the limit of the level 9 peak of the martial emperor realm and possess the strength of a first tribulation demigod." In the face of Yuhauran's kindness, Pallas did not care about consolidating his realm after the breakthrough. First, he solemnly cupped his hands and bowed to express his gratitude. "Brother Qi, with our friendship, do you still need to be so courteous?" Yuhauran pretended to be angry and questioned him. "Ha ha!" Yuhauran pretended to be unhappy and questioned him. This made Pallas even more touched. After a few laughs, he planned to consolidate his realm after the breakthrough. However, Yuhauran shook his head and stopped him. "Brother Qi, let's go back to the prince's mansion in Fengrun City to consolidate your realm." As a hidden family that had been passed down since the Middle Ages, the Lan family must have kept the life tablets of every direct descendant. The news of the family leader's life tablet being broken should have alarmed all the experts in the family. Faced with the unexpected death of the family leader, the third tribulation demigod experts of the Lan family would have probably rushed over. Even deity realm divine spirit realm experts might descend upon them. Therefore, in the face of the countless experts of the Lan family who were enraged, it was wise to hide temporarily. "All right." Pallas immediately nodded in agreement when he thought of the heaven and earth Qi in the prince's mansion that could accelerate the consolidation of the realm and assist in the transformation of the power of law. Just as Yuhauran and Pallas used the method of tearing the void to leave the green lake and left behind a thawing formation to erase all traces, the void above where the family leader and the gray-robed elder were killed was suddenly torn apart. Immediately after, 9 experts with terrifying auras walked out from the torn void. "Dihua, immediately check all the traces left at the scene and try your best to find the murderer who killed the family leader." Among the 9 experts floating in the air, a slightly thin white-haired old man in a sky-blue robe ordered a middle-aged man in a brocade robe. "Yes, Dihua." The middle-aged man in brocade robe called Dihua cupped his hands in obeisance and directly floated above where the family leader and the gray-robed elder were killed. Then, he formed a special seal with his 10 fingers and twitched his nose that was slightly bigger than an ordinary person's. When the seal formed merged into the void and his twitching nose did not smell anything, Dihua cupped his hands in obeisance and replied with a hint of fear on his face. "Great Elder, please forgive Dihua for being incompetent. I can't find any traces left by the murderer. Get lost." After hearing Dihua's reply, the white-haired old man in the blue robe scolded with a gloomy face. Then, the gloomy face was instantly replaced by a smile. The white-haired old man in the blue robe gently ordered a middle-aged man in a gray robe who had a slightly elegant temperament. Chapter 1739. In Qinghu Mountain Range. The middle-aged man with an elegant temperament nodded indifferently in the face of the white-haired old man in a blue robe's gentle command. Then, he appeared directly on the ground where the Lan clan leader and the gray-robed old man were killed. He sat down cross-legged and began to form seals quickly with his 10 fingers. But unlike the earth flower seal, the seals formed by Tianting did not merge into the surrounding void, but just floated in front of him. When there were 9 seals formed by his 10 fingers, Tianting suddenly put his palms together and yelled softly. Merge! With Tianting's yell, the 9 seals quickly merged together and gradually turned into a smooth mirror surface. The images of the Lan clan leader and the gray-robed old man slowly appeared on the mirror surface. This also made the 8 experts floating in the air reveal a trace of surprise in their eyes. But the surprise in their eyes did not last for long, as it was interrupted by a special energy that appeared out of thin air on the mirror surface. The special energy that appeared out of thin air on the mirror directly erased the 2 figures that appeared in the mirror at a speed that was as fast as a clap of thunder. Facing the disappearance of the 2 figures in the mirror surface, the 8 experts floating in the air immediately revealed a look of anger in their eyes. But Tianting's expression did not change at all. His palms that had just been put together quickly separated, and then his 10 fingers continued to form seals at lightning speed and merged the seals into the mirror surface. After condensing a total of 18 seals that merged into the mirror surface, Tianting breathed a sigh of relief and revealed a proud smile on his face. Tianting, who is the murderer? Seeing the smile on Tianting's face, the white-haired old man in a blue robe appeared in front of him in a flash and asked anxiously. Great Elder, wait a moment. Tianting raised his head and signaled to the white-haired old man in a blue robe. He stretched out his slender white left hand and patted the mirror surface in front of him gently. Then, in the ripples that appeared on the surface of the mirror, a slightly illusory figure slowly appeared. Although the figure that appeared in the mirror surface was too faint to really see his appearance, the 4 pairs of white wings that stretched out behind his back made the white-haired old man in a blue robe unable to help but curse with gritted teeth. Damned god race scum, this old man will tear you to shreds. Looking at the phantom of the Shen clan expert that appeared in the mirror, a middle-aged man in a green robe in midair had a look of suspicion in his eyes. After that, he directly appeared beside the blue-robed white-haired old man in a flash and reminded him with a slight frown. Great Elder, Elder Tianting, the ancient god and demon races have been sealed by the 4 guardian families and Yu Haoran. Then, how did this expert of the god clan break the seal and leave the ancient god test grounds? How did he suddenly appear in the Qinghu mountain range and launch a sneak attack on the patriarch? After hearing the middle-aged man's reminder, the white-haired old man in blue robes couldn't help but fall into deep thought. However, Tianting's eyes revealed a hint of displeasure. Lan Longhui, are you doubting the results of my formula Dao calculations? After hearing Tianting's displeased questioning, Lan Longhui's eyes immediately flashed with a trace of panic, and he quickly knelt down on one knee to apologize. Elder Tianting, please don't misunderstand. Longhui definitely didn't mean that. Humph. Ignoring Lan Guanghui's apology, Tianting stood up and snorted coldly. He then said to the white-haired old man in blue robes coldly, Great Elder, since you don't believe the results of my formula Dao calculations, then there's no point for me to continue to stay here. Then, Tianting will take his leave. After cupping his hands at the old man in blue robes, Tianting directly reached out and tore the void in front of him. He then stepped into the void crack and disappeared from the Qinghu mountain range. Slap! Just as the void that Tianting tore regained its calm, a crisp slap suddenly sounded in the silent scene. Great Elder, Longhui knows that he was wrong. I hope Great Elder can be merciful and forgive Longhui's sins. Not daring to care about his red and swollen cheeks, Lan Longhui immediately knelt down on both knees and begged bitterly while kowtowing hard. Ignoring the begging Lan Longhui, the white-haired old man in blue robes ordered the other 6 people, immediately use the method of intertwining divine thoughts and thoroughly search the entire Qinghu mountain range for me. You must find the murderer who killed the clan leader. Yes, Great Elder. Since no one came forward to ask for Lan Longhui's help, and no one even looked at Lan Longhui, the 6 powerhouses floating in the air cupped their hands in acknowledgement and immediately scattered in all directions. Then, they mobilized their divine senses to the limit and began to search the entire Qinghu mountain range. Guanghui, you will now return to the clan to accept the punishment of being bitten by 10,000 snakes. I hope this can earn Tianting's forgiveness, and he won't pursue the sin of doubting him just now. After the 6 subordinates left, the white-haired old man in blue robes sighed softly and instructed Lan Longhui with a complicated expression. Thank you for your care, great elder. After hearing the punishment of being bitten by 10,000 snakes, Lan Longhui's face instantly turned as pale as paper. While kowtowing to express his gratitude, a trace of despair appeared in his eyes. The punishment of being bitten by 10,000 snakes was to seal one's cultivation, remove one's defensive magic weapon, and allow 10,000 snake-type exotic beasts of different levels to bite off a piece of flesh from one's body. Although he would not die even if he lost all of his physical body due to his peak second tribulation demigod realm, this punishment would completely deprive him of the hope of becoming a martial god in the future. Feng Run City, in the prince's mansion. Thaling pointed at a water mirror condensed from mist in front of him and sneered with the corners of his mouth slightly raised. You Howren, after seeing the behavior and humanity of the Lan family, now you know why I had to kill the clan leader of the Lan family. Looking at the pale-faced Lan Longhui in the water mirror with a look of despair in his eyes, Yu Howren could not help but sigh softly and nod his head. Then, he raised his head and looked at the white-haired old man in blue robes with a trace of coldness in his eyes as he asked, Thaling, how did a clan like this that has already lost its humanity survive the destruction of the Middle Ages and recent ancient times and continue to exist until today? The reason is very simple. Strength, snobbery, and viciousness. After waving his hand to disperse the water mirror in front of him, Thaling replied with a cold smile. A special bloodline inheritance can allow the Lan family's strength to always be at its peak. Snobbish people who bully the weak and fear the strong can help them avoid the risk of being exterminated. The vicious style of cutting the weeds and eliminating the roots can ensure that they eliminate all potential dangers. Thaling, a clan like this should not continue to exist in this world. Chapter 1740. In the prince's mansion in Feng Run City. Strength, snobbery, and viciousness were not only the foundation for a family or sect to establish itself in the world, but also the key for every warrior who set foot on the path of martial arts. Just because the Lan family had done all 3 of these things to the extreme, it had provoked Yu Howren's desire to destroy them. This made the Tower Spirit realize that the situation was not quite right. After all, in addition to snobbery, he was not inferior to the Lan family in strength and viciousness. Therefore, taking advantage of the opportunity when Yu Howren was refining the black and white wings with the yin-yang strange fire, Thaling directly mobilized the 9 chaotic marks of the real victor, and then carefully checked the destiny energy in his body. Sure enough, when he found that the destiny energy, which was originally only gathered in his heart, had begun to spread in all directions, a look of understanding flashed in Thaling's eyes. Time was like flowing water, always passing through his fingertips without him noticing. More than a month had passed since Palace advanced to the peak of Emperor Wu's level 9 peak. Boom! On this day, Yu Howren was sitting cross-legged in the practice room. With the help of a 6-colored void fruit and a space crystal containing pure energy, he was trying his best to comprehend the power of the Law of South and the Law of North. Suddenly, there was a deafening roar between heaven and earth. Accompanied by the deafening roar, the entire prince's mansion and Feng Run City shook violently. Without any hesitation, Yu Howren quickly put away the 6-colored void fruit and the space crystal and left the practice room in a flash. Then, he floated above the mansion and looked toward the northeast. Thaling, the roar just now, does it mean that the tomb of Zhenyuan Great God has officially opened? That's right. Thaling, who had been paying attention to the situation of Zenuanzi's tomb, nodded in confirmation and further explained. Yuhauran, in fact, Zenuanzi's own talent and opportunities were not inferior to those of Tongtian Supreme and Xingtian Supreme at that time. However, he had never become a supreme existence in the supreme realm, because too much of his energy was diverted by his erudition. Alchemy, crafting, poison, talisman, formula, and more than a dozen auxiliary cultivation systems. Not only did he have a certain degree of involvement in all of them, but he had also reached the level of proficiency in all of them. Therefore, in the tomb that he carefully prepared for himself, there were not only powerful offensive and defensive formations, but also countless traps that were set up to aid his cultivation. After listening to the tower spirit's further explanation, Yuhauran nodded to indicate that he understood. At the same time, he used his divine thought to inform the Scarlet Loathing Beast and Yusiki, who were cultivating in the mansion. "Follow me." When Pallas and Yusiki came to his side, Yuhauran nodded and led the two of them straight to the Huayu mountain range hundreds of thousands of kilometers away. The Huayu mountain range was located in the north of the eastern region, close to the North Sea. It was formed by 36 connected mountains. Due to the influence of the North Sea's climate, although the Huayu mountain range was rich in spiritual qi, the impurities contained in the spiritual qi were not suitable for absorption and cultivation improvement. As a result, not only were there no forces stationed in the Huayu mountain range, but there were also very few exotic beasts living in the mountain range. However, as a deafening roar suddenly came from the bottom of the mountain range, it completely broke the usual tranquility of the Huayun mountain range. Countless experts from the 5 major regions of the Tianxian continent landed at the edge of the mountain range. Of course, as the Huayun mountain range was located in the eastern region, at least half of the hundreds of experts who arrived at the edge of the mountain range were from the eastern region. Among them, the most eye-catching was Dongfang Huayun, who was wearing a veil on his face and standing on a white rock at the edge of the mountain range. Not only did Dongfang Huayun have a peerless appearance, but he was also the second powerful formation master in the Tianxian continent to break through to the formation emperor realm. Dong Mingji greets brother Zhixiang. Seeing Dongfang Huayun's eyes looking at the Huayun mountain range, there was a flash of surprise, shock, and doubt in his eyes. Countless experts who rushed over were eager to know what was going on in the Huayu mountain range. A middle-aged man in embroidered clothes, who had a close relationship with Dongfang Zhixiang, walked up to the white rock where Dongfang Huayun was standing. He cupped his hands and greeted Dongfang Zhixiang, who was standing beside Dongfang Huayun. "Oh, it's Brother Mingji." When he heard someone greet him, Dongfang Zhixiang stopped talking to Dongfang Huayun in a low voice and cupped fists in response with a smile. "Brother Zhixiang, the Huayu mountain range is not far from the Morning Sun Peak where the Dongfang family is located. You and Miss Huayun are also the first to arrive at the edge of the mountain range. What do you think about the roar that was formed in the mountain range just now?" Dong Mingji asked immediately after Dongfang Zhixiang's reply. "Brother Mingji, although the Morning Sun Peak where the Dongfang family is located is only half an hour away from here, it's not like you don't know the real situation of the Huayu mountain range. How could we pay attention to it?" Dongfang Zhixiang explained with a bitter smile in response to Dong Mingji's question. But then, Dongfang Zhixiang put away the bitter smile on his face and continued with a serious expression. "However, according to my daughter's peak formation Emperor Realm method, I found that the Huayu mountain range was shrouded and sealed by a powerful formation. Brother Zhixiang, what is the level of the formation? Can Miss Huayun break the seal of the formation?" A formation that could shroud the entire mountain range not only required an extremely high level of formation skills, but also the assistance of countless heavenly materials and earthly treasures. On the other hand, the formation that used countless heavenly materials and earthly treasures to shroud and seal the entire mountain range, was to hide the amazing treasure hidden in the mountain range. Therefore, Dong Mingji, who had countless thoughts flashing through his mind, continued to ask with a slightly excited expression. This Dongfang Zhixiang, who did not have a high level of formation skills, did not know how to answer Dong Mingji's question. Fortunately, Dongfang Huayun, who had finished inspecting and sensing the formation, opened his eyes and took over the topic in a timely manner. Senior Dong, if Huayun's speculation is correct, the formation that sealed this mountain range should be the 5 elements and 5 elements formation that was created by Zhen Yuan in the Middle Ages. Hearing Dongfang Huayun point out that the formation that shrouded and sealed the entire mountain range was the 5 elements and 5 elements formation that was created by Zhen Yuan, who was at the peak of 9th grade martial god in the Middle Ages, everyone could not help but fall into deep thought. On a mountain peak about 100 miles away from the Huayun mountain range, Yu Haoran, with his hands behind his back, looked in the direction of the Huayu mountain range with a trace of surprise in his eyes. Yu Haoran, Dongfang Huayun's talent and comprehension in formation skills are the most outstanding among the countless formation geniuses that I have seen in Thaling. Thaling could not help but praise Dongfang Huayun, who was standing at the edge of the mountain range, through the barrier of the sea of consciousness space. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Nights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.